Douluo Peerless. The Light of Creation Introduction. www.jiujiu.com. This work will supplement and modify a large amount of grassroots logic in the original work, most importantly. This work will not be brainless, each character has their own brain. Time travel is a good thing, but time travel into Huahang is not a good thing, let alone starting from a baby and having children without regrets. As the saying goes, fighting with people brings joy, and fighting with heaven brings joy. https://www.zayashuan.com. Basic settings, cultivation system. You are listening at novel full.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, all attributes. The overall energy and upper limit of stock, as well as physical and mental qualities such as strength, have all been improved, but cannot improve the level of martial soul. Note: there may be many differences from the original work, so the setting here is the main one. P.S. The original setting is too low, and I often need it myself. Instead of looking for the original text, I might as well change it myself. Soul Master Level. Soul Warrior. Level 1 to Level 10. Soul Master. Level 10 to 20. Great Soul Master. Level 21 to Level 30. Soul Master. Level 31 to Level 40. The limit that ordinary families can reach. Most Soul Masters will begin to understand their own Tao after this, and the deeper the Tao, the faster the relative soul power level. Speed will be about 60% of Soul Masters reach their destination soul sect. Level 40 to Level 50. After this, there is no need to eat again, except for some special martial soul holders. Soul King. Level 51 to 60. Soul Emperor. Level 61 to Level 70. Nearly 90% of Soul Masters are at the finish line. Soul Saint. Level 71 to Level 80. Having a true martial soul body can greatly increase one's strength, but the specific situation of its improvement is closely related to one's own martial soul quality, with significant differences. The overall difference in all attributes of the same person in each large interval of different cultivation levels before the Soul Saint is the highest, usually not exceeding 30%. There is no constant standard for the improvement of the Soul Saint, but the minimum is 100%, excluding the actual state of the martial soul. At this stage, Soul Masters with a strong foundation can begin to condense the first soul core. Spiritual power needs to reach the spiritual abyss realm. To break through, it is necessary to have a master's understanding of the main cultivation of one's own martial soul. Soul Douluo. Level 81 to 90. Overall attribute improvement of about 20%, title Douluo. Level 91 to Level 94. Overall all attributes increased by 20%, advanced title Douluo must condense the first soul core. If you already have the first soul core, you can choose to condense the second soul core. The understanding of one's own Tao has reached an elite level. Spiritual power must reach a qualitative and intangible level. The limit of 98%. Soul Master Super Douluo. Level 95 to 98. At this stage, there is a 20% gap between each level of advancement. Spiritual power needs to reach a tangible and intangible level, to achieve a master's understanding of one's own morality. Extreme Douluo. Level 99. 30% difference in all attributes compared to 98 level Super Douluo. Spiritual power reaches tangible quality, to achieve a master's understanding of one's own path. Half God. I have gained a preliminary understanding of divine power above the extreme Douluo. Pseudo-God. Soul power has been completely replaced with divine power, but there is no divine position. Divine level. From level 100 to level 109. Divided into deities with and without deities, at least one understanding of one's own path has reached the level of a great master. True God level. Level 110 to 119. The understanding of oneself as the main practitioner has reached the level of Supreme Master or above Super God level. From level 120 to level 149. Master Cultivator arrives at epic, possessing accompanying artifacts, Divine King level. Above 150 levels. Master Cultivator arrives at Epic, possessing accompanying supernatural artifacts, early stage. Before level 170, mid-term. Before level 190, before level 199 in the later stage, Perfect God King. Level 199. Master Cultivator comes to Legend, Supreme God King. Above level 200. Creation. Cannot be achieved through cultivation, only by possessing the seed of creation, gradually maturing, and passing through 3 stages can one reach it. Divine Realm. There is only one divine throne of the God Emperor, the Creator God has been shattered, just the Creator God of the Divine Realm. There are 5 divine thrones, Shura, good, evil, destruction, life. There are 61st level divine positions, 11 broken positions including Rakshasa, Angel, Ice God, and Flame God. 300 secondary deities, 123 have fallen, the 3rd level deity only has an ordinary divine position. Douluo Plane. Divine Emperor's Throne. There is only one, also known as the Dragon God, but different from the Dragon God in the Dragon Realm. It is a native dragon god of the Douluo Plane, belonging to the Panlong family and the wingless flying dragon genus. It has fallen and has given birth to 9 sons, but all have died prematurely and none have become a god. Dragon Realm. Already on the brink of extinction, falling to the lowest stage of the plane, only 1 step away from disappearing, Divine Emperor Divine Throne, only 1, damaged, not the same as the dragon god on the Douluo Plane, belonging to the Pterodactylosauridae family in the genus Hexapterosaurus, the only species owned by the dragon god, Divine Thrones, 9 in total, all of which have been destroyed. Division of Spiritual Realm. Lingyuan Realm. 0.50 people are born into this realm. Lingtong Realm. 51.500 Linghai Realm. 5015,000 This realm is below Soul Saint Lingyuan Realm. 5001.20000 A necessary prerequisite for reaching the Soul Saint, divided into 2 parts, those exceeding 10,000 are also known as tangible and intangible, which are necessary conditions for reaching the account ban, Spirit Realm. 20,001.50000 Reaching over 30,000 is also known as tangible and intangible, which is a necessary prerequisite for Super Douluo. Reaching over 40,000 is known as tangible and qualitative, which is a prerequisite for Extreme Douluo Xinyuan Mirror. 50,001.100000 A necessary prerequisite for reaching a demigod. Reaching over 80,000 is called entering the Divine Realm, which is the most basic requirement for entering the Divine Level 3rd Level Divine Element Realm. 1000011000000 Level 2 Divine Yuan Realm. 1000011000000 First Level Divine Element Realm. 10000000000000000 Divine King Realm. 100 billion spiritual power must meet the requirements in order to elevate one's realm. Of course, to elevate oneself, one not only needs spiritual power, but also a certain understanding of the rules. The Spiritual Soul Master Conference is quite special, and stronger spiritual soul masters can generally achieve a significant level of spiritual power surpassing their peers. Tao. Rule Property, Introduction, Novice, Promotion, Proficiency, Expert, Elite, Master, Grandmaster, Great Master, Supreme Grandmaster, Epic, Legend, accompanying Dao Yun. A Dao Yun understanding of each person's inherent attributes in their martial soul. General Properties. Space, time, elements, life, death, emotions, power, speed, wisdom, thought, soul, flesh and blood, stars, metals, etc. Some of them can be further subdivided into more details, while others can be combined to form new paths. Some paths can be split and slid down into simpler paths, while others can be combined by multiple paths to develop into broader paths. For example, the source path can be split into waterways, or different element paths can be merged into the source path I. The Tao that is mainly based on space is called the universal Tao. The Tao, mainly composed of celestial bodies, is called the Qiongdao. The Tao that is mainly based on dimensions is called the empty Tao. The Tao that is mainly based on time is called the Zhou Tao. The Tao that is mainly based on force is called Force Tao. The Tao primarily composed of elements is called the Source Tao, unfinished to be continued Soul Master. The most rigorous and highest review standard, capable of using in making soul guides. There are two types of reviews. Soul mentors who have reached the corresponding level of cultivation, and soul mentors who have reached the corresponding level of knowledge and theory. First level soul mentor, soul cultivator of the future. Second level soul master, cultivation comes to the great soul master. Third level soul master, cultivation comes to soul master. Fourth level soul master, cultivation comes to soul sect. Fifth level soul master, cultivation comes to soul king. Level 6 soul master, cultivation comes to soul emperor. Seventh level soul master, cultivation comes to soul saint. Eighth level soul master, cultivation comes to soul Douluo. Ninth level soul mentor, cultivation comes to title Douluo. Own your own exclusive ninth level soul guide made by yourself. 10th level soul mentor, cultivation comes to super Douluo, possessing a soul guide of one's own life. P.S. Most 9th level soul mentors in the Sun and Moon Empire cannot actually be considered true 9th level. Forging grade. First level forging master, hammering metal requires equipment. Second level forging master, skilled in metal forging and removing impurities. Third level forging master, achieving 1,000 forging skills. A fourth level forging master with 1,000 forged 9 grades. Level 5 forging master, also known as spirit forging, can forge metal with spiritual energy. Can manufacture the most basic 1-character bucket armor. A level 6 forging master who combines various metal forging techniques, also known as fusion forging. Can manufacture 2-character bucket armor. A level 7 forging master with 1,000 lifelike souls, known as soul forging, can make the spiritual metal forged have a certain level of intelligence. Can manufacture 3-character bucket armor. An 8th level forging master who possesses his own divine hammer and can manufacture 4-character battle armor. The 9th level forging master, also known as the heavenly forging god craftsman. After continuous improvement in cultivation, one can create higher field dough armor. Undead forger. Blood and meat forger, a type of forbidden forging that can forge one's own or someone else's blood and flesh with metal to create blood and flesh metal. The resulting armor will grow together with the user and cannot be removed. And users often need to pay a certain price. Soul forger. Forge the souls of others or oneself. There can be two ways. One is to forcibly extract their souls, and the other is the soul items left by souls that have gone to the underworld, with metal, forging soul ingots with extremely special effects. Temporarily confidential, note. Only the creator can use the dough armor themselves to achieve maximum effectiveness. Using non-self-made dough armor can have a small increase in combat effectiveness, and may even have negative effects. About martial souls. In this work, the martial soul is a reflection of the essence of the soul, and what kind of essence determines the characteristics of your martial soul. The origin of the soul must be the origin of the martial soul, but the origin of the martial soul may not necessarily be the origin of one's own soul beast martial soul. The most basic and direct, reflecting the essence of the soul. Weapon soul. The entity of the martial soul is reflected by a special object, and the origin of the soul reflects its characteristics. For example, the origin of Haotian hammer of Haotian sect is Haotian giant python. But what is special is that it is not affected by bloodline, and the essence of the soul has become more inclined towards a true pure human, considered a subhuman. Body martial soul. Due to the Tang monk king's explosion of the capital of slaughter, the Bloody Mary inside flowed out, polluting the water sources of the entire continent. The foundation of martial soul reflects the changes that occur in the body, for the various organs of the human body. Divided into two types. The essence and martial soul embodied in animal form will be suppressed by bloodline. The essence of the soul, which is manifested as a pure entity and is not suppressed by blood, has already arrived at pure humanity. Elemental martial soul. Influenced by the Scarlet Mary, pure elemental martial souls have become even rarer. Find Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com because the direction of variation is often uncertain, and pure elements will be influenced towards other martial souls such as beast martial souls, weapons, and spirits. Therefore, the Four Elements Academy was forced to disband due to the inability to recruit new students, and was later absorbed and annexed by Shrek. Link martial soul. Different from twin martial souls, this type of martial soul is only considered as one martial soul, but its martial soul reaction body may have multiple or different. For example, Huiyuhao's spiritual eyes are the connection between the eyes and the brain, and the martial soul. Accompanying martial souls. Similar to twin martial souls, it arises from the special bi-directional display of soul origins. There are two forms of martial souls, but there is only one set of soul attachment areas. Twin martial souls and multi-martial souls. There are different soul powers generated within the soul source, or there is more than one soul source within a body. For example, Ice Emperor is similar to the former, while Electrolux is the latter. Evil martial soul. Produced by being cursed by a large number of souls or actively absorbing a large number of souls. It is also possible to continuously absorb the malignant mutations generated by the evil attribute soul rings for generations. Typical example. Tangyi, you can absorb their souls for cultivation by killing life of the same or different races. Special branch. Blood and flesh martial souls, which can evolve by devouring blood and flesh on the basis of evil martial souls. Attributes and properties. Attributes. Flame, water, light, darkness, gold, wood, earth, snow, space, time, dimension, ice, gravity. Traits. Undead, life, power, kindness, evil, rebirth, slaughter, spirit, flesh and blood. In terms of economy, politics, cultural customs, etc. Currency. 100 copper soul coins are equal to 1 silver soul coin. 100 silver soul coins equals 1 gold soul coin. Most ordinary people earn a maximum salary of 1 silver soul coin to 2 silver soul coins per day. Introduction. Collapse, Destruction, and Rebirth, 6K. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, how Tang San feels, how he stutters. In the quiet and pitch-black space, the young man in black caressed his pale cheek with his left hand, his long blue hair flickering with repeated crimson hues, accompanied by a semi-ethereal and eerie starry blood-red pupils between his fingers, as well as a wild smile that was not concealed on his face. These deformed, dark, twisted, and almost crazy expressions turned towards the man in front of him, wrapped in chains and exchanging affectionately with the four big men for countless years. The man on the chain had an extremely haggard face, a broken expression, and a look of despair. His disheveled, frozen flower blue hair partially covered his supposed handsome face, and his whole body was covered in a mixture of blood and Han stains, making him nauseous. Feeling the arrival of the crazy young man, his weak and bony body suddenly burst into a burst of vitality. His swollen and bloodshot pupils suddenly tightened, and he collapsed and shouted, Yuhao, I'm sorry, everything is my fault. I shouldn't try to control your destiny like a mole ant. I'm sorry. Kill me, whatever you want me to do, kill me. And the four big guys on the side quickly withdrew their salty eyes, lewd smiles, and disdainful gestures when they saw the visitor, organizing their previous expressions with extremely fast movements. Arrange the queue in an orderly manner, each with a resolute expression and a straight and upright body facing the newcomer. When the newcomer officially appeared in the field of vision, the four big men lowered their heads and bent down, arranged themselves in a solemn and dignified manner, completely devoid of the previous lewd intent. "Hello, Lord Creator." The four big guys respectfully said in unison. "Show loyalty in your behavior, words, and actions." Hui Yuhao called them Soul Four, and their status in the base realm is like that of the heavenly punishment and double dragon gods in the strong realm. Each of them has a unique secret skill, and their fighting spirit and patience are astonishing. The secret soul skill also gives you extra surprises. Upon hearing the man's plea for mercy, the young man's laughter became even more arrogant and insane. "Ha ha ha, Tang Shenwang, did you ever think that when you did those things, you would one day be trampled on by the ants you once saw? You would also be so embarrassed. You wouldn't think that saying these things would offset what you did before, would you? Ha ha ha." Hearing this, the man looked even more desperate, as if he wanted to grab the last straw to save his life. He shouted at the top of his voice. "Don't let me go. You can tear up Wudong again and recast your love." Click. Click, click. The crazy man seemed to be stimulated by a word in the man's words locked on the chain, without any signs, without even using time. He moved to the man on the chain, and then the chain man's entire chin, neck, tongue, and other organs flew out, hitting the metal wall heavily. Immediately after, the entire space within the range of the blue-haired youth was torn apart and shattered to nothing. Only the throat organ that was initially lifted off caught up with the speed of space fragmentation. This object, which contains an unknown amount of power, comes into contact with the pitch-black walls of space, but does not break the metal walls or leave any dents. Instead, it is directly imprinted on it. If you look closer, you will find that the wall is covered with this type of pattern. Some are brains, some are broken bones, some are large intestine, and I don't know how much it has been imprinted. Time quietly passes, but it is meaningless. The young man's expression slightly recovered, and he lifted the man on the bracelet casually before regaining his composure. His voice was sharper and hoarse than last time, and he started speaking on his own, showing off the so-called last chip in his eyes. "Rain Hao, please, I was really wrong, really. Please, Rain Hao, Xiao Wu, Gu Yuna and those bitches are all yours. Kill me." After going crazy, the man instantly regained his composure, like a silent death god, and apart from the former emotional god Hui Yuhao, there was no one else who could do so. "Everything is over." Hui Yuhao did not stop too long, nor did he answer his words. He turned around, tilted his eyes, and finally gave a cold glance at the Tang God King hanging on the iron chain, then turned around and left. "Rain Hao. Rain Hao." After seeing Hui Yuhao leave, Soul 4 followed the initial instructions and began a new round of torture against the man on the chain. Hui Yuhao's eyes were numb as he walked away, paying no attention to the other person's pleading behind him. He had heard this voice countless times and it was meaningless. Even his own life felt meaningless. After all, nothing can change. Revenge. It's not that refreshing either. Hui Yuhao couldn't help but recall the physiological father he forgave during the Douluo Star era, who seemed to be called Dai Hao. This name Hui Yuhao didn't pay much attention to, but it reminded him of another name that Hui Yuhao had once cared about. Hui Yuner. Shaking his head, Hui Yuhao didn't want to think anymore. This name made him feel that his hundreds of years had become ridiculous, as it was the belief he had used during his human years to support his survival through revenge. But now, when he thinks about it, it is so funny and ironic. Yes, a child growing up in a deformed environment can learn something without any resources. But what did you calculate for yourself? What can be considered? Immersed in the ethereal love, she is so brainless, and it is ironic to personally end herself. God follows the will without any frame interval, as if appearing out of thin air. Hui Yuhao arrived at an extremely huge, ceiling, space. Its internal structure is a nearly enclosed matchbox, with the only one that can communicate with the outside world being a tiny window consisting of 4 iron fences that have long been eroded and decayed by blood and air. A few rays of sunset shone on it, but were engulfed by boundless darkness, leaving no ripples on the broken mud wall. It was like a coffin sitting in this remote corner, low and full of oppression, and there was a hollow prison that no one paid attention to. There are no lights in the prison, it's all black, not visible to the sky, not visible to the ground, not visible to oneself. Mice, cockroaches, and geckos crawl back and forth in the darkness. A white-haired woman imprisoned in the prison seemed to be very afraid of mice, and every time he heard the sound of mice, his heart always felt uneasy. She no longer knows how many times she has been bitten by mice on her body, and how many times every part has been tasted by mice. This mouse seemed to be like a forest, deliberately teasing her. It crawled onto her spine and jumped onto his shoulder, causing him to tremble and scream in fear, not knowing how to handle it. Wu Lin, help me, Wu Lin. The iron gate was reflected slightly by the afterglow of the sunset. At this moment, I finally saw the full picture of the prison. Bats build their nests on the roof, mice make holes at the foot of the wall, centipedes crawl along the cracks in the wall, and cockroaches stand black on the roof. The ground is piled with mouse droppings, bat droppings, and cockroach droppings. But what sets it apart from this scene are the 3 beds in the prison, which are snow-white, smooth, delicate, and extremely comfortable, but they are not frequently used. Looking left again, you can see the 2 people tied by iron chains. Gu Yuna and Tang Wulin. The vacant position is with their child, the most beast in the entire Douluo universe. The second dragon god, Lan Xuanyu. The 3 of them used to be top-notch fighters in charge of the universe, but now they have all fallen into this small, dirty prison full of pungent stench. The body and limbs are fixed to the wall by countless huge and sturdy iron nails, with rusty iron chains entwined around the body. Some are tightly and some are loose, while others are marked with red marks and decay due to prolonged exposure. Where is Lan Xuanyu? Damn it! You bastard! Ah! Let me go quickly. Ah! On the pure white bed, a very burly and robust figure, with sharp blade-like curved spikes on its back that extended to its powerful tail, constantly waving in the air. A half-dragon person with huge sharp edges on its head was gifted to a beautiful woman on the bed to marry. And this beautiful family is not exactly Lan Yuxuan, the grandson of the second-generation dragon god and Tang San. Lan Xuanyu has completely transformed into a woman, and his hair length and figure have not changed much compared to before when he only had the treasure-hunting beast change his body. His appearance has not changed much, but his lines have become softer. Black hair, icy skin, slender figure, wearing a silver long skirt, outlining beautiful curves. A pair of black big eyes bright and clear, captivating. The waterfall-like black hair and slender dragon horns fit together and scatter behind, a pair of deep eyes as if even the soul is about to be devoured, and the beautiful face gives a suffocating feeling. His gaze was cold, but it had a unique beauty that added a touch of heroism compared to his wife by Jiujiu. He was originally emitting the scent of sunshine all over his body, but now he is carrying a big belly, with resentment and despair in his eyes. Feeling Hui Yuhao's breath suddenly appearing and approaching, the head of the heavenly dragon, who was dating the fully feminized second-generation dragon god on the bed, quickly sorted out at an astonishing speed and pressed his right hand against his chest, kneeling down on the ground. Hello, Lord Founder. Whether it's the expression, body movements, or language, it all reveals admiration for the newcomer, and the words are full of gratitude. Completely unaffected by the carefree and unrestrained demeanor of a moment ago, like 2 people. His expression was not as crazy as Tang San's. He only had a calm expression, with beautiful and dazzling eyes hanging low like a starry sky and a sea. Most of them were covered by long eyelashes, and his eyes were empty and lifeless, yet they constantly revealed the majesty of creation. Hui Yuhao didn't say much, he just came to take a final look. He didn't have much hatred towards the 3 people in front of him, and he did it out of a momentary interest. Without leaving anything behind, he left in a flash again. However, the head of the heavenly dragon did not rise, but continued to maintain this movement. Half an hour later, he stood up and bowed deeply in the direction of Huiyuhao's departure. He once again paid the highest respect to the direction of Huiyuhao's departure to the dragon man. It was not until an entire hour later that he slowly withdrew his movement and stood up. But his eyes remained fixed on the spot where Huiyuhao had left in a blink of an eye. Over the course of 10,000 years, he had met each other quite frequently, but every time his expression showed a hint of endless gratitude. The Longma galaxy has long been sacrificed by Lan Xuanyu to enhance his strength, and it no longer exists. It is their great creation god Huiyuhao who rediscovered them from the river of time and pulled them back out, giving them a chance to avenge themselves. This is the hatred of extermination. There is actually no essential difference between the Douluo Federation and the Longma Federation. Both civilizations are constantly plundering resources outward, and competition is inevitable. The common goal is to strive towards elevating oneself to the level of the divine realm. However, in order to enhance the strength of Lan Yuxuan, the Tang Divine King attracted the most powerful and close to the level of the divine realm, the Crimson Plane, which was the biggest enemy of all living beings in the anti-life type plane. This is an absolutely unforgivable sin in the entire Douluo universe. It's like two political factions in a country competing for power and profit, but one of them lures a fascist imperialist country to invade their own territory and uses the other's wrist to defeat their opponent's political faction. This is a betrayal of one's own country. Looking at this, it is a betrayal of the entire spiritual realm. Looking at all the living planes in the entire Douluo universe, competition is inevitable, but whenever encountering the anti-life plane, all planes have a common understanding. To pause their disputes and coordinate their efforts to resist the anti-life plane. After all, in the universe of Douluo, resources are renewable, and everything can be obtained through the accumulation of the most basic resources over time. And it is precisely because of this that the Douluo universe has the appearance of the anti-plane. It is precisely this fundamental consensus in the universe that the Dragon Horse Galaxy did not die against the Douluo Federation. However, what the entire Dragon Horse Galaxy did not expect was that someone would betray them for their own benefit, and before their death, they only thought it was an accident. Their Dragon Horse tribe was just too unfortunate. Knowing the true history waiting for them, how can they not be angry? But who allowed them to know that what could be done again was their great creator god Huiyuhao? Of course, the reason why the other party resurrected the entire Longma galaxy is mostly to make them relentlessly torment the Tang family. Huiyuhao did not conceal this, which was well known to them, but it didn't matter. Huiyuhao was indeed their benefactor, and their goals were also the same. Huiyuhao needs to torture them, and they all want to seek revenge against them. Is everything about to end? Brother-in-law. Tang Wulin is still nailed to the prison wall, like a tattered puppet, but her mind is very clear. I'm not your brother. Law. Wang Donger can also be considered his daughter. Upon hearing these words, Huiyuhao was slightly shocked and stunned. Oh, so do you regret it? Huiyuhao suddenly stopped beside Tang Wulin and looked up at him with a sideways face. Tang Wulin smiled. He had questioned Huiyuhao countless times during this eternal time period, but had not received any response from the other party. Gradually, he felt relieved. As the only person in the Tang family with upright values and conduct, he was given enough time to understand why Huiyuhao did so. Now he is like this. He has resented and become angry, but gradually he stopped speaking up. Watching his child suffer, his heart will ignite a fire. But every now and then, that once said would be like a bucket of water extinguishing the just lit flame. Huiyuhao's whole life was arranged by me, just a tool dog of our Tang family. You don't have to be so polite to him when you send him around. It seems I guessed it right. Huiyuhao smiled back and said, that's right. Could you also answer my question? Do you regret it? You and I are very similar, really very similar. We instinctively become each other's. This is also my own choice, that is my father, and I can only stand on his side. All of this is a cause and effect that I cannot choose, who isn't it? With a sudden thought, Hui Yuhao's figure arrived at a palace in the Centaur system. In the magnificent palace, Hui Yuhao walked on a red and golden carpet, with 2 rows of military columns standing neatly on both sides of the company, leading directly to the dragon guards on the throne. Everyone had a solemn and serious expression, standing tall and straight, with their left hand behind them and their right hand clenching their fists against their chest, declaring their absolute loyalty to Hui Yuhao. Slowly, he walked with his ability to teleport directly. He still chooses to walk a certain distance. This may be his last time coming here, not because he is nostalgic, but because he still has some memories of the past that he cannot let go. Slowly walking on the red carpet, it disappeared and gradually replaced with flat soil. The lush green grass in summer turned a bit yellow in autumn, but still alive. He walked on a path paved by fallen maple leaves, one by one entering a quiet autumn forest. Hui Yuhao strolled along, and the scenes in his mind echoed back and forth, like drops of water falling close to the lake, causing waves of ripples. Compared to his concept of eternal existence, the time he experienced was extremely brief but unforgettable. For a long time, a tattered dagger, a tattered insect skin, an abandoned rusty medal, a harpoon, a butterfly hairpin, a grey cloth robe, emerald green ice, a roll of white poked hair, a fish scale, a bean-sized teardrop, and a golden skull and his past memories. This was his first experience as Hui Yuhao, and then he died. Dai Yuhao grew out of his body, occupying his body and becoming a tool of the Tang family. But he did not die completely and still had a trace of residual soul. By chance, during a mission of the Tang family, he, who should have awakened tens of thousands of years ago, woke up now. Even though it was too late, his power remained strong. It was enough to revive a trace of Hui Yuhao's own soul, giving him hope, but his passive awakening also caught the attention of the Tang family. With the help of his 8 companions and their desperate efforts, he succeeded. He mastered him and regained his former self, but it seemed as if he had lost everything that belonged to him, the young man named Hui Yuhao, and his last moments as Hui Yuhao continued to move forward. The fallen leaves accumulated thicker and thicker, making a crisp sound as he stepped on the ground. It wasn't until he met a delicate porcelain doll sitting on the beautiful snow in the forest. The autumn wind blew with a clatter, and the pink and blue hair, dressed up as a porcelain doll, fluttered in the air, covering the side face and the hollow gaze of the doll. Just at the first glance, a touch of his eternal divinity that belonged to Hui Yuhao surged out, and his divinity could no longer suppress the human nature named Hui Yuhao. At the first sight of the doll, his eyes came back to life and began to turn red. Tears as big as beans continued to flow down the trail of tears from billions of years ago, eventually falling into the hills without making any sound or leaving any trace, as if they had never appeared before. He stumbled forward and knelt down in front of her with an uncontrollable thud on his knees. Slowly and cautiously, he reached out his hand and gently touched the delicate face of the porcelain doll. Autumn, winter. I don't know how long, a few months, a few years, or hundreds or even thousands of years. The concept of time is no longer important to him. There is no longer anything he cares about in this world. The only thing that supports him to live is revenge from the beginning, and after countless ups and downs, he still has this emotion. However, this strong and indescribable emotion is still being washed away by time. Nothing can withstand the erosion of the universe. But Hui Yuhao was not among them, and the balloon in his heart still contained regret for the past. He came this time to say goodbye for the last time. He has already penetrated the essence of all things in the universe through this endless river of time, but there are still many things that he cannot change. These are all eternal concepts of the entire, transcending the universe as something he will never be able to reach. Xiu'er, Dong'er, goodbye. Hui Yuhao touched the face of the porcelain doll, his forehead touching each other. Well, perhaps another me will give you a better future. Hui Yuhao's eyes contained various emotions since his birth, revealing the longing and affection of the host in front of him, but also containing incomprehensible sadness and sorrow, deep and surging. It's better to experience it firsthand to have a better understanding. What disappointed you? Teacher, have you ever been like this before? Hatred lies in the moment when it is gone, obsession rises, and at the same time, he completely understands his only teacher. Alex. Without any worries, he stood like this, feeling the blowing of the autumn wind. His pale blue hair accompanied the pink and blue hair of the porcelain doll, fluttering in the air in a disorderly manner. His right hand tightly held a dazzling and gorgeous golden spear, in the only snow in this hill, in front of his two beloved people. Blood soaked in snowflakes, warm blood gradually flowing down, a gentle breeze accompanying this maple leaf forest. The vast autumn scenery. Tragedy, the beauty of predetermined destiny, cruel yet nostalgic. Huiyuhao counteracted all the instinctive resistance of creation, and his dazzling spear pierced through his body, destroying the soul of the world. Feeling his body gradually becoming cold, and the bone-chilling pain, Huiyuhao's expression remained unchanged. Looking for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, his control over his body became increasingly poor, and he occasionally lowered his head and lifted it, wanting to take another look at them. His eyes unconsciously looked at the exquisite and beautiful porcelain dolls, his heart feeling unprecedentedly comfortable. It's all over now, in eternity, Huiyuhao finally smiled and said, "No, not yet. This is just the beginning of a better update. With the extinction of creation, the last dimension will come." The entire Douluo universe was extinguished and turned into a void of chaos. There are several extremely powerful individuals who can sense it within a few tenths of a minute at this moment, including the heavenly dragon head, but he did not feel surprised or panicked. But, with a relieved smile, as if I had known it before. In the universe after its extinction, Huiyuhao still exists, but no longer in a concrete way. He once again starts observing from scratch all the events, processes, and outcomes that occur in the entire universe from its birth to its extinction. The pyramid of every basic characteristic of the things that exist in the analyzed universe, as well as the basic constituent concepts of each universe. An invisible clock is silently spinning. Every time the pointer rotates, it is the passage of billions of years, and Huiyuhao can no longer remember how many times he has rotated. In a daze, Huiyuhao felt a throbbing sensation. He is the son of Genshin. Amidst Huiyuhao's endless exploration and eternal call, he had a faint reaction and appeared. The light in this dark night appears so faint, yet so unique that he is the only one in the entire universe emitting a faint light. Emit the light of creation that illuminates the world. Huiyuhao knows him, he is him. Chapter 1. Traversing, 8ks. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, okay, I won. The night sky was misty with 7 starry lights, and the residual moonlight shone on a rudimentary small bungalow. In the room, a young man named Lu Nua in the 3rd year of junior high school excitedly shouted on the bed, his expression dancing brightly, as if he were wildly swaying like Fan Jin's Hongju. I won, that's great. I won, that's great. The young man shouted loudly and his mental state was obviously abnormal, indicating that he had been stimulated by some kind of mental stimulation. Hiss. Click, the night sky, originally full of stars, suddenly became pure white and transparent, as pure as jade and emerald, like the void at the end of the universe, the highest realm of heaven, but at some point it begins to crumble and distort the space in this area with an extremely panicked quality, leaving only one piece of everything around it twisted in just an instant, an empty island. Compared to the desolate small single room above it. The crack deepened and expanded, constantly tearing apart everything around it, emitting a strange and brilliant brilliance, just like the end of the new century, Dong. With a crisp sound of water drifting, Luno, who had been going crazy in the room the previous moment, felt a darkness in front of him, as if a strong light had struck but there was no such scene. He then felt a pain coming from his neck and unfortunately landed on the ground with his head first. I don't know if this can be called ground platform shaking out waves of ripples. It hurts so much, why did it suddenly fall off? Did it be an earthquake? Lu Nuo murmured to himself, covering his slightly painful head. The intense pain and dizziness made him lie flat, unwilling to move, with his eyes tightly closed and his teeth clenched. The intense pain emanating from every part of his body made it difficult for him to endure the urge to vent and relieve the pain. The dizziness emanating from the head is even stronger, with a feeling of being confined in the car for a whole day in the summer without high-temperature subsidies at 42 degrees Celsius. But his rationality tells him that he must calm down rationally now. For everything that happened, Lu Nuo believed it was an earthquake. Although he had exerted all his strength, his eyes couldn't open for some reason, but his mouth remained silent. "Mom! Mom, where can you hear me?" He shouted and called out to his mother, shouting for a long time, but he broke his throat but did not receive an answer from him. "Only calm, we don't know what the reason is, and it's difficult to understand why this 15-year-old boy sees his life as worthless. The boy's eyes have already lost the light of life, and whether or not he has lost it has become indifferent." What he was more worried about than himself was that his only recognized relative would leave in front of him, and his subconscious didn't want to experience this feeling again. The finally calmed state of mind rolled up like a raging sea, and the fear and panic in his heart quickly crawled into his mind. The strong emotional fluctuations and the personality that brings the worst possible outcome to the situation make the young man almost collapse. He knew very well that doing so was pointless. It was pointless for these little people to cry, and no one would pity them, let alone look at them for it. The top priority now was to understand the current situation, but fear could not dissipate. His fists clenched tightly against his nails, deeply gripping his body. Taking advantage of the new pain emanating from his body, he quickly calmed his mind and rested on the flat surface for quite some time before recovering. He reached out his hand and struggled to support his body to climb up from the ground. What catches the eye is not a dark and narrow space, nor is it a post-earthquake scene of broken arms and debris. On the contrary, it was an exceptionally boundless snow-white color, with no form or object, as if living in an unowned land that does not exist in reality. "Where is this?" Lu Nuo unconsciously blurted out this sentence, the exceptionally white color in the space, emitting a dazzling light that made it somewhat unclear, so he slightly covered his eyes with his hand. After watching this scene, his doubts doubled in his heart. Dai's eyebrows furrowed tightly, his eyes puzzled, but his pupils were filled with confusion. Immediately relieved, the wrinkles on his forehead stretched out and he let out a long sigh. "Is this heaven? I didn't expect such a place to exist in the world, but it seems that my luck is not very good. I just passed the exam, and I haven't entered the school gate yet. I haven't even tried to cross with my classmates. Sigh, it doesn't matter. It seems like I'm the only one who came up, and my mother will be fine. But when I leave, he will be very sad. Hello. The Creator." Just as Lu Nuo was lamenting and preparing to recite a poem, a deep and magnetic voice came from behind. The ripples in Lu Nuo's heart were instantly stirred up by the words in his ear, like a startled bird that suddenly rose and quickly calmed down, but still curious in his heart, he turned around and looked back. I found a humanoid figure standing abruptly behind me, shining with a more dazzling light than the vast white in space. When did he appear? Is it difficult to say that he is the so-called God? Well, it seems that my materialist faith should collapse. Lu Nuo thought to himself that his body instinctively wanted to pull back a distance, but he was shocked to find that his body was no longer under control and completely unable to move. Perhaps it was because of the sudden panic that caused a shock to the brain, or perhaps because Lu Nuo was too emotional just now, he didn't notice that the other person's way of calling him was a bit strange. As Lu Nuo was puzzled, the humanoid body spoke up, "Hello, don't be afraid. I didn't mean anything malicious. This is not heaven, let alone hell, and you are not death. I have encountered some difficulties that I cannot solve, and I would like to ask for your help." I am deeply sorry for the way you came here, but I have no choice. The stability of this space is worrying, and I hope you can forgive me. The language used in human behavior is extremely humble, as if a person sincerely seeks help from others, as revealed by their words. Luo, who had just arrived in this space, dared not take it lightly. He calmed down and analyzed the other person's words, finding the most important issues from their words. I'm not dead, and this guy is not God. What's the purpose of this guy? He asked me to help, isn't it really like he said, right? What can I do for a problem that even a guy of this level can't solve? It can't be that kind of cross-world novel, but if you think about it, it would be great. But can I still come back? What timeline will it be when I come back? What will happen to the original world? Will the mother be affected again? If I were to return to the warriors, it would be fine, but do I really have the right to refuse? Luo briefly clarified several pieces of information, including his current situation and the fact that his life, death, and life are all determined by the other party. After considering his own situation, he couldn't come up with a solution after much thought. He didn't even know the details of the other party, and they might already have a clear understanding of him. Moreover, he didn't have the ability to resist, and all he could do was communicate with them. May I ask what exactly is going on, Your Excellency? Even your existence cannot solve it. I am just a junior because I am so ordinary that I cannot be compared to ordinary humans. I have little ability, and even my own world's knowledge system has not been fully understood. If I want to interfere with your affairs, I may feel a bit overwhelmed. Would you like me to go back and let me help you choose a few more? If there is anything I can tolerate, I will tell you. Luo's use of words implies humility, but he incorporates several key points he needs to know, along with some tactful excuses in his words. The human body ignored his words and instead said to itself, I want you to change a world, a universe called Douluo. What, Douluo? Isn't this a novel written by Gong Changwei? How has it become the world? Maybe it's not fun to find me. Luo heard his words, and his heart could not help roast. Well, he only dares to say it in his heart without speaking out, which is a bit impolite. Moreover, what he said about Douluo may not be the one he thinks, it may not be true, it's just a name. After all, there are countless universes, and there are all kinds of wonders. It is still safer to observe the changes and listen to the following text. After pondering for a moment, Luo summarized his current environment and replied, May I ask if the Douluo you mentioned is the novel from my world? Secondly, after completing your requirements, can I return to my original world? Luo did not panic, but prepared to ask clearly first and then combine the pros and cons before answering. Firstly, he needs to understand whether he has the ability to fulfill the requirements he has put forward, and secondly, whether he can return to his original world. He is not an orphan, but there is a loved one he cares about. Although there is only one, he still cares. He can't leave everything behind to play in another world. There are also people who are concerned, waiting for him all over the world. Although he is used to the dull and boring life in the old world, he also wants to find some different feelings. For a normal 16 or 17-year-old passionate youth, traveling through a different world has a fatal attraction, but of course, this different world is not as unattractive as the grey fantasy. Of course, this is the second best. Thinking of this, Luo's eyes filled with memories of the past. Suddenly looking back, my life has been quite ridiculous. He sneered inwardly. Don't worry, the current you are not the original you. You can understand that I have copied you. The humanoid clearly did his homework on Luo before bringing him here, knowing what he cared about. When Luo threw out the question, he quickly answered it, which reflects the importance of this matter to it. After hearing about the separation from the original world, Luo thought for a moment. After a moment of contemplation, Luo chose Suoha directly. Who in a boy's paper with no worries would refuse a wonderful adventure in a different world? Of course, don't have the kind of big adventure with ups and downs, like licking the toilet in this adventure. At this point, Lu Noa gave a positive response to the human form. After receiving a response, the humanoid body untied the shackles on Luna's body, and many cracks gradually appeared in the space, constantly forming wisps and wisps of mysterious substances that were both intentional and intangible, constantly rushing towards Luna's body. This is a trace that every universe has, and you need to merge with it. Of course, your soul does not belong to this universe, so you will become extremely special. This special existence is a demon outside the realm. Although it's called that, it doesn't actually make any difference. It can be considered even more special. Extraterrestrial demons are souls pulled from other universes by the universe itself to make up for deficiencies, but you are different because we deliberately choose from outside the realm, from the sea. P.S. Pay attention to the content. Represents currently non-public information. The concept of extraterrestrial demons and extraterrestrial demons is not the same, as in Alex's case, the protagonist belongs to extraterrestrial demons. Although the saying goes, the essence of the two is still common. They become independent variables of the universe. So that's why there is the saying that Alex is the only hope for Huiyuhao to break free from the control of Tang Monk King. The humanoid began to explain some rules to him. However, none of these narratives are related to Douluo, all of which are higher level words such as the origin technique, universe leaves, and universe C that can be understood and achieved, but cannot understand their reasons and origins. The sound of Lu Noa is shrouded in mist, and I feel that I have benefited a lot, but there is a strong texture that I cannot fully understand. I can only jot down all of it as much as possible for future use. Do you have any further questions? Since it's time travel, is there a system? Lu Noa asked with a hint of anticipation in his heart. After all, most of the novels in the book are equipped with a system, otherwise it's just some rebellious golden fingers, such as Grandpa's, and so on. Unfortunately, there was none. Is there any cheating that goes against the sky? Lu Noa continued to ask. I'm not sure how to answer this either. But now that you know more about it, let's let you personally meet the person you're about to reincarnate, who can also be called the employer. As the words of the Creator God had just come to an end, a strange and colorful particle flickered around Luno's side. Luno watched as the particles gradually converged into a clearly visible blue-haired male body before recognizing the identity of the so-called employer. Huiyuhao. Huiyuhao. When Lu Noa looked at the color of the scattered ions in the air, he used his brain to make a comparison and already guessed the identity of this person. After all, this is also one of the few memories left in Luno's fragmented childhood. Huiyuhao, it seems that the earliest timeline for going is also in the Peerless Tangmen, but this is difficult to handle. If everything goes well in the future, but during this period. Huiyuhao didn't continue to think about it. These are things that don't need to be considered for the time being. As soon as his thoughts fell, another doubt condensed into his mind. What does he need me to do? What can I do for him? Why did he choose me? These three doubts lingered in his heart, but he couldn't find the answer for a long time. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration came to my mind, and I miraculously went back to the previous question. Oh, no matter how much he does, we all agreed. If it's a big deal, it's just an adventure. It doesn't matter if there are no great achievements, it's also good to be carefree. His thinking may seem right at first glance, but what is built upon it is without any constraints. Lu Noa, who had a clear mind, was not in a hurry. The ions in front of him were not condensed into reality, and he needed to wait for a while longer. When the other party speaks first, they will know their purpose. Colorful particles scattered and swirled in the air, dancing and transforming in a chaotic manner. Gradually, they began to build towards the appearance of Huiyuhao, starting from the bones, then to the blood, flesh, meridians, and internal organs. Although the scene was somewhat eerie, it did not have a significant impact on Luo's mental state, which was slightly abnormal in a 15-year-old boy. Is this a success? As Hui Yuhao's figure condensed, this entity also began to take action. He first looked down at his hands to see if he had acted according to his own ideas, and then looked at his body again. After a while, Hui Yuhao gradually adapted to the newly formed body. Then he looked up and looked around, then looked in the direction where Luo was, his eyes full of excitement, but inadvertently revealed a subtle concern and reluctance. Is that him? It looks okay, but I don't know how capable he is, Hui Yuhao thought to himself, but his expression remained unchanged. In an instant, both sides were like this. You looked at me, I looked at you, but didn't speak, waiting for the other party to speak first. Yuhao, this is the chosen person. The humanoid figure saw the awkwardness between the two sides and indeed wanted to show an expression to express his helplessness towards these two scumbags. However, he did not have any helplessness, but now someone needs to first speak up and break the eerie and wonderful atmosphere present. Upon seeing this, Yuhao spoke up and said, you should also understand some things, so you also agree to be reborn as me, right? Upon hearing this, Luo confirmed that the person he was about to turn around with was actually the protagonist Hui Yuhao from the second installment, and that he was going to the Douluo continent during the Peerless Tang sect era. When he first heard about it, he was still very happy. After all, you can be considered as your childhood, and when you have nothing to do, you have reviewed it several times. I have also seen many fan works. But soon he realized what was wrong and caught a key phrase in Hui Yuhao's words. Rebirth and becoming him. Does this mean that he went to the second part as Hui Yuhao, rather than crossing his entire journey? So my own operating space is much less. Thinking of the other nicknames of the Peerless Tang sect, my heart's joy turned into sadness. I couldn't bear to read the ancient chapters of the universe when I saw them back then. Even during my elementary school years, when I was in a state of ignorance, watching the plot would make my stomach ache and I would vomit blood. P.S. Author's personal experience, Doom Power, the regeneration of Hui Yuhao has not been hacked yet, and he cannot escape. He will be trained as a dog power by the Tang God King. Traveling through this kind of thing can be considered a beautiful thing no matter where it is. However, crossing to Do Air, especially to Hui Yuhao, is definitely not a beautiful thing. Because Hui Yuhao is one of the most tragic male leads in the entire Douluo series, and even in the entire online world. Even looking at Hui Yuhao's tragedy in a certain way, it seems even more tragic than Huizigu. When he was young, he had a love-brain mother who was valued by a high-ranking deity from the previous generation from birth. The abnormal environment from a young age destined his personality to be very deformed. He finally resolved it and was hit by two consecutive disasters called autumn and winter, completely collapsing and falling into the pure dog of the previous generation. Throughout his entire life, he was calculated and planned by the Tang God King. This journey through the past is equivalent to confronting the gods with the human body, and it is even more difficult than this. The gap between the two is not just about realm. If we use the game as a simple analogy, it is like you are just a novice player who has watched the strategy once, and you have to face the final full-level boss directly, and even more importantly, this boss is still fully open and does not give development time. Play with you meow. Noticing the constant changes in Luo's expression, Hui Yuhao couldn't help but furrow his brows and look at the figure beside him with some confusion. Through the expression on his face, he conveyed a sentence. They don't want to, why did you call me here? It is natural for Hui Yuhao to observe Luo's emotions at the first time. After all, he used to be the god of emotions. Even without the support of emotional power, his level of observation of others' personalities may not be very low. At this moment, the emotions expressed by Luo, although not long, were still detected by Hui Yuhao. At this moment, the radian of the corners of the mouth is more difficult to press than AK. At this moment, the face is wrinkled into fried dough twists, which is more ugly than eating shit. It is too difficult to see this expression. Besides, this place is endless, and there are no other objects, so there are only 3 of them. However, the human figure did not reply, just stood there quietly watching, as if his body had been pineapple jackfruit. OMO, Lulu's thoughts did not linger for too long, but soon came to his senses and began to contemplate negotiations with this employer. In the current situation, if things don't go well, I won't suffer any losses. Anyway, my current self is just a replica. It's better to be brave and give it a try. I am willing to inherit your mantle, but could you please let me know some information? For example, which era am I going to turn around to? Babies, youth. Luo asked Yu Hao across from him. Looking at the human figure seeking the answer, Yu Hao was also surprised in his heart. He thought that the young man in front of him had not agreed, or rather regretted it. Unexpectedly, the other party suddenly spoke up, and the content of the conversation was also directly aimed at the topic, which was exactly what he wanted to tell the young man in front of him. This inevitably made Yu Hao. I admired the rationality of the young man in front of me a bit in my heart. But this surprise only flashed by, which shows that Yu Hao, who was once the emotional king, has a strong control over his own emotions. Facing Luno and preparing to explain to him. This is a long story, I will explain it to you step by step to prevent you from not understanding. Firstly, you are not a time traveler but a reincarnation. You will be reincarnated to replace me, which means you need to be reborn again, which may be difficult to understand. Let me give you an example. Tang-san, you should know that your reincarnation is just like him, but there is a significant difference. He was born by chance, while you were deliberately born by us. The world you have traveled to is somewhat different from the novel in your own world. Although the overall plot is similar, this is a world that is not as described by your writer. This universe is a tender leaf on the same branch of your universe, but you are a branch with a certain degree of commonality with your universe. In terms of your cultural knowledge, the simplest example is similar to Darwin's theory of biological evolution, where we are not hydrogen-based organisms but also carbon-based. As for the love brain you mentioned, well, I can't explain it very well in the world of Douluo that I understand, most normal people are not. Of course, only humans. You should have also noticed many plot points in his novel, and it can be seen that he wrote them haphazardly. However, there is a hidden logic that is guided by the law of cause and effect. As for the cause and effect, let me tell you from the beginning. Your universe is too special for many people to covet, but the law of causality does not allow it. Therefore, some beings will use their own thinking and will to guide people in your world to write their experiences and works of the universe to enhance their reality in the entire universe. P.S. Penalty for causality. It is not allowed for the existence beyond the universe to excessively interfere with causality in other universes or on different timelines of the universe. In most cases, as long as it is not excessive, it will not lead to it. But certain universes have extremely special situations that can be encountered as long as one dares to touch them. The degree of punishment in the law of causality is in order of light, medium, heavy, near, and void. This is also the third point I want to make. Why did I choose you? The person next to me has already explained to you before about things you don't understand, such as Sahai. You should also know that your universe is extremely special, known as the primordial universe, which is also the reason why I chose you. So why did you let me take over from you? With the handle and knowledge you currently possess, it shouldn't be too difficult for you to resist your own fate, at least much better than letting me, a stranger, replace you. Lulo replied, although this answer might make him miss out on the wonderful adventure of time travel, he still didn't choose to hide. This is Luno's true intention. He extremely hates deception, hates being deceived by others, and also hates deceiving others himself. This is what he has always adhered to, which also leads to his lack of friends in reality and no one who can understand him. The clear rain and silent wind alone hid its face, but it is easy to be alone in the wind and rain. But even so, he will still do so, recognizing a concept in his heart. A person's life is only a few hundred years, and there are even diseases in the picture that can reduce their lifespan. Coupled with the ups and downs in the picture, this life path is not easy to follow. If we follow the thoughts of those old people, i.e. secular thoughts, it may not even be as satisfying as death. He said the path he wants to take is up to him to decide, and the words of others cannot hinder him. Of course, this is not to underestimate others, and he will also listen to advice, but only absorb useful information. So he detests the deceit and mutual suspicion among the wicked in the world. Especially after coming here, knowing that I am just a separate entity becomes even more obvious, even if it may harm his interests. P.S. Add some character traits and explain here again that concealment and deception are two different properties. One is to keep it a secret, and the other is to deliberately fabricate lies for one's own benefit. And this is the original intention of the protagonist in his past life, and there will still be some growth in the future. After all, the world he is in is different, and the protagonist's mentality is gradually growing and transforming to find his true self in this mirror-like mentality, because I cannot change, cannot bring memories back to that era, cannot prevent their deaths. This universe is a product of the war between players, and I born in this universe will be influenced by fate. Therefore, I cannot bring memories back to life along the river of time, allowing them to change their branches and dry up the original path. At this point, the tears in Yuhao's eyes couldn't help but spin in circles. The sparkling and brilliant tears in those starry eyes were constantly swirling, wetting his eyes. His expression was full of regret and reluctance to part, mixed with a hint of resentment, but this state did not last long. P.S. Fate in this work is a very broad definition of fate for the entire universe, and destiny is divided into two different eras. The original Tang Dynasty era and the original Huiyuhao era. The fates of the two eras are different, and the specific reasons are not mentioned here, so let's not list them for now. With a sigh, I continued to speak. The soul at the level of the Creator God cannot perish, so it can affect the cause and effect part of oneself in the long river of time. Even if a newborn baby is stillborn, they will have their own soul. After I arrived, I took out my soul from it and left a space. At this time, as long as other souls reside, I can become another me. My plan is for you to move in, and you may feel confused about it. Let me give you an example. It's still Tang San, he's probably the same way, but he secretly ran in. Stop, wait a moment for me to tidy up. Upon hearing this, Lu Luonaoguazi was already confused by the standard riddle spoken by the person, and could no longer keep up with the rhythm of Yu Hao. He quickly shouted to stop. We're starting to sort it out. This vast amount of information, so you have also reached the level of the Creator God, and who inherits Tang San's time travel. And who made him time travel? Lu Luo asked Yu Hao across from him after a moment of contemplation. Upon hearing this, Yu Hao remained silent and instead turned his gaze to the nearby deity. This movement was also captured by Lu Luo, who understood its meaning. Later, Lulu learned some information from him. Time is running out. In order to prevent Tang Xinluo from forcibly invading the memories inside, I will activate the seed of creation that exists within your body in advance, which is possessed by the Douluo plane. It's also funny to say that the first creator god of that world searched the entire universe but couldn't find it. Unexpectedly, in the hands of a small plane that he couldn't control for a long time, he had already placed this long-awaited object inside me. But speaking of this, Huiyuhao couldn't help but let out a deep sigh of self-blame. After a while of delay, I continued with the previous paragraph. Therefore, the first martial soul spirit I may also undergo some degree of change as a result, most likely replacing the original source of the soul from the white tiger to creation. However, it is always a positive change. At the same time, you can also use some of its power. However, remember to make sure to keep yourself hidden deep enough before using this power. It's best not to use this power in front of the sea god or other gods. This power is too immense. Even the two gods who destroy life would salivate at the sight of this power. It can be said that anyone in this world who touches on a god is absolutely irresistible to this power. In this field Lu Noa finally felt at ease. It turned out that there were cheats, although it was not yet clear how big the cheats were, they were still present. However, this cheat sounds like it's from the original work. Hua Hang already has it, but it hasn't been activated. Yu Hao finally added the usage of creation to Lu Nuo. Hua Luo closed his eyes, but the images in his mind flashed back into his already closed eyes. Perhaps Ilao and them can all survive, right? Follow him. I don't know if Tian Meng can catch up with the Ice Emperor. But he didn't say anything, just lowered his head, revealing bursts of smiles from the depths of his heart, although these smiles looked a bit bitter. Lu Luo felt a little puzzled when he saw this and wanted to ask himself, what will happen to Yu Hao now after becoming him? But before he could speak, his body began to become illusory, and waves of women's shouts could be heard in his ears. Madam, if you put in more effort, the young master will be coming out soon. P.S. Someone asked before how they knew it was a man before he was born. I can only say that it's already mentioned here, it's about to come out, half of his body is coming out, don't you know? Ah! As his body dissipated and the woman let out a scream, a completely different Hui Yuhao was born. Chapter 2. Hui Yun'er's death and escape from the Duke's mansion, 9K. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, accompanied by the crying of the baby, Lu Luo came to this world as Hui Yuhao. Note. Abandon the term Lu Luo in the future and use the name Hui Yuhao directly, accompanied by the first breath of fresh air that the newborn breathed in this world, the alternative soul of Hui Yuhao completely awakened. At first, his consciousness was blurry, his mind was heavy, and his eyes couldn't open. Inside the rudimentary wooden house, on a decaying wooden table, the faint light emitted by the candles through his eyelids still made Hui Yuhao feel uncomfortable. The whole body was soaked and wrapped in a damp liquid, feeling extremely uncomfortable. After slowly adapting, a strange sense of vision appeared in Hui Yuhao's mind, which was very wonderful, at least for Hui Yuhao. Through this strange feeling, he found a young woman looking straight at him. And this woman has fair and delicate skin, a graceful figure, a slender figure, and soft black hair like tassels, flowing down to the chest. Although his clothes were covered in stains and dirty patches, they couldn't stop this person's stunning beauty. Her face was pale and powerless, her eyes drooping. Although she had finished giving birth, her body was still sweating profusely, and she had a sizable chest that kept rising and falling. In the quiet room, one could hear him panting fiercely, indicating that her physical fitness was not good. Madam Hua, the child has been successfully brought up. With the old woman's many years of experience in childbirth, there are no problems with the child. You can rest assured. Yuhao. It's okay. Hui Yuhao's eyes were pitch black, and he couldn't open his eyes yet. He had to face the darkness and listen to their conversation. As he constantly adapted to the intensity of the light coming from the outside, Hui Yuhao opened his eyes. Hui Yuhao, feeling somewhat confused and half at a loss, observed the scene before him. In front of her was a young woman with a slender figure, a graceful figure, and long brown black hair draped around her, letting her messy and sticky wet on a pale face covered in sweat. At this moment, he was panting heavily, his chest heaving with a few pounds of rotten flesh, as if he had just experienced some kind of huge pain. His limbs were soft and he looked down on the bed, but his soft eyes kept staring at himself being lifted up in mid-air. Well, it seems that I have really traveled through time, so it seems that the woman in front of me should be Hui Yun'er, Hui Yuhao's biological mother. No wonder this beauty is favored by the Duke of White Tiger, but it's not very useful. Hui Yuhao calmly pondered the current problem and found that his surroundings were not very good. The only light source that illuminated the darkness was a short candle placed on an old table. The lonely candle swayed in the air, emitting a faint light that illuminated his surroundings. With the faint light of this candle, looking around, it is not difficult to find that one is in a house made of decaying and dilapidated wood. There are occasional drops of water on the roof, mixed with moist soil and decaying wood. The odor emitted is not very fresh, nor is it considered unpleasant. In short, it is not very good. Next to her, there was an old woman with grey temples and a face full of deep wrinkles caused by time and wind and rain. She was wearing patched cloth clothes and looked like a midwife. This baby. What's wrong with Grandma Ting? There shouldn't be anything wrong with Xiao Yuheo, right? Hui Yuner looked at the midwife's furrowed brow and felt uneasy. She dragged her weak body and wanted to get up, but the intense pain and numbness in her crotch didn't allow her to do so. She could only ask in that trembling voice. It's nothing, it's not a bad thing, it's just that this child is so strange. Lao Yu can be considered an antique who has been working in the delivery industry for half a lifetime, but I have never seen a baby who opens their eyes right after birth. No matter how fast it is, it will only open in a day. Secondly, the newborn child's skin is wrinkled, and it is inevitable that the skin will seep out of the amniotic fluid, which is considered normal. However, the child's skin is smooth and delicate, as white as those 18-year-old women. Will this have any impact on Yu Hao? These influences are essentially only beneficial to him, without any harm, but the child's appearance, which cannot be foreseen, is bound to be an unparalleled beauty in the future. She is a top-notch beauty embryo, but unfortunately has something under her crotch. He is a man, but there is a high probability that someone will gossip about him in the long future. The midwife couldn't help but sigh in her words. Upon hearing that it was okay, Hui Yuner breathed a sigh of relief in her uneasy heart. At least her teammate Yu Hao's health was not affected. Yu Hao is his and Dai Hao's child. He really doesn't want their first child to die young as soon as they are born. This is the crystallization of their love. Hui Yu Hao currently has no mind-reading skills, and he does not have much affection for the so-called mother in front of him. If he were to read what the woman in front of him was thinking, he might start cursing on the spot. Can his love brain try to pass away? After the midwife carefully examined the baby a little more, she picked up Hui Yu Hao in the air and then placed him in a nearby basin to clean his body. Meanwhile, Hui Yuner looked at him with a kind expression on her face, with a hint of anticipation in her eyes. You are not afraid of catching a cold when you wash the body of a newborn child in cold water this winter, are you? Hui Yu Hao felt the piercing cold from his body and roast in his heart. The water in winter is really cold. Perhaps it is because the founding power comes from the god of emotions. Even though Hui Yu Hao is still a baby, his grasp of the spiritual aspect is very delicate, and he can detect it slightly as long as it is revealed. The expectation in Hui Yuner's emotions was also noticed by Yu Hao. Seeing this, a sense of loneliness and shame rose in his heart, because he knew that his martial soul was not destined to be a white tiger. Why is this child so strange? After being born for so long, why hasn't she even called out? The midwife suddenly asked again, and Yu Hao was stunned. He also realized that as a newborn, he was too quiet. After all, who would have the memory of being born? Damn it, I forgot. There should still be enough time to install now. Start the performance. Ah. Woo. Although the midwife who saw this still had some doubts in her heart, she still handed over the washed body of Yu Hao back to Hui Yuner, who had already regained some strength. So Yu Hao returned to Hui Yuner's embrace. Then Hui Yuner untied the clothes on her chest and prepared to give Yu Hao his first meal in the world. Ah, wait a moment, this. I didn't mean to. This. Yu Hao was startled by this scene. He was reincarnated with memories, and even though he was his biological mother in this world, he couldn't help but feel shy. Quickly, the mouth is eating. Ah, it's so shameful, ah. Fortunately, the baby's control of the limbs was not very coordinated. Otherwise, with Hui Yu Hao's current awkwardness, he would have to use his toes to carve out a 3-bedroom and 1 living room to alleviate it. Suddenly, there was unbearable pain in Hui Yu Hao's head and eyes. Ah. What's going on? Does eating milk still bring such pain? Yu Hao felt confused in his heart, but he didn't understand this aspect. Hui Yu Hao's mind was in severe pain, but his thoughts were still rapidly recalling. Is it difficult for me to think too much about things, beyond what my body can currently bear? But he couldn't help but think for a moment longer, and the pain grew stronger and stronger, as if it exceeded the level of pain that this infant's body could bear. Unable to resist Hui Yu Hao's continued pressure, his pink and tender mouth let out a cry, with soft lines and extremely delicate facial muscles tense. His silver teeth clenched tightly, and his tightly closed eyes opened, emitting a sea blue halo like a starry sky, accompanied by a shimmering golden light like stars. The skin around the corners of the eyes also began to twinkle with ripples of light, and even the nearby space began to have a slight aura, shimmering with some light. Even the dimensions unconsciously moved up a bit occasionally. There are extremely strong soul power fluctuations that overflow outward. However, it is almost impossible for ordinary people to perceive these subtle dimensions and spatial changes, along with the soul power generated by the twisting space. Ah Wow Wu Wu, upon hearing her child's crying, Hui Yuner was clearly panicked. Ignoring her hands numbed by the fluctuation of soul power, she quickly called out the midwife next to her to inquire. This shouldn't be. Faced with this situation, the midwife was also helpless. She has taken over dozens of children, not to mention hundreds, but she has never encountered such a situation before and is still feeling confused. As the pain subsided slightly, Yu Hao's consciousness became clearer and he began to analyze the situation under his eyes. Shouldn't it be? Does a baby have a headache when eating? If they think too much, the brain should be overloaded and only one brain should be in pain, not the eyes. It's impossible for my brain to discover the existence of the eyes, right? After all, the brain doesn't know that there are eyes in the body, but on the other hand, is the body structure of Douluo people the same as ours? Hui Yu Hao was lost in thought, suddenly regaining his senses, and then realized that something was wrong. Wait. The organs that cause pain are the head and the eyes. Damn it, can't it? Is it? Does the martial soul awaken early? Unexpectedly, the midwife spoke up. What's going on? I just thought of it, how could he say it too? Is it difficult for his martial soul to read his heart? Yu Hao was suddenly startled in his heart, afraid that he might be tricked into something else. Hui Yuner's expression was even more flustered, and he quickly asked him, Is Yu Hao okay? At this moment, he did not care whether Yu Hao's martial soul was a white tiger, but rather, like a mother, valued the child's life even more. Although I'm not quite sure, it should be the early awakening of the martial soul. I've only heard that Lord Huang Jinshu, the heavenly Sha Douluo, was a martial soul that awakened on his own during his growth. However, his situation is a bit too special. Lord Huang Jinshu's early awakening of his martial soul was an external stimulus. This child started to awaken as soon as he was born, which is different from that adult. The midwife quickly explained everything she knew to Hui Yuner in detail. Upon hearing this, Yu Hao immediately felt relieved and knew that he had not revealed anything, at least not to be too suspicious. He helped to lower the level of similar cases. However, I remember not writing about awakening in advance in the original work. Rain Hao thought for a while and attributed it again to the magical seed of creation, but he didn't think much about it at this moment. A blue-haired young man holding a golden spear in the divine realm slightly curled his lips and gazed at all of this. Time flies like a white horse, and Hui Yu Hao's age has also reached 7. In the original world, this should be the age of elementary school, but now Yu Hao is engaged in high-intensity labor every day. At the beginning, he planned to live quietly until the age of 12, waiting for heavenly dreams to come by, or being able to persuade Hui Yuner to leave halfway, but it was obvious that he had not achieved either of these goals. After all, Tianmeng has a newbie gift package hidden in the Douluo plain. If Huogua had not been disturbed by the hands and feet of the Tang Monk King and had not been activated, he probably wouldn't have been so miserable. It will only be even worse. Having only the power of terror, but without a corresponding mentality, one can only be played with by others recklessly, let alone the fact that the early stages of creation were not as strong as imagined. The Tang God King's abnormal desire for control would not allow anything beyond his control. When the people of the Duke of White Tiger's mansion discovered that Huiyuhao's martial soul was not White Tiger, everything changed. The original Huiyuhao mother and son had at least a maid's room to live in, and their work was also a normal maid's job. At least 3 meals a day were eaten by humans. After awakening his martial soul, he moved to the stable and lived from morning till night, chopping firewood, washing clothes, carrying water, sweeping the yard, and feeding horses. The food was just a paste of sauce that even the dog shook its head at, referring to the meager food of a certain high school that looks like a lump for defense, and self-medicate. On these days, Huiyuhao's mother and son lived together for 7 years. Even when Huiyuhao recalled his past life at school, the duck neck he ate felt delicious. What a fool! Hurry up and chop the firewood. I'll tell you, if you can't finish these dishes by noon, don't eat. The middle-aged man next to him impatiently urged. Even though Huoho's face was pale and he was panting heavily, he remained indifferent. Due to his awakening of his martial soul from birth, his demonic treatment came faster than the original work, which led to Huiyuhao becoming extremely malnourished from a young age, almost relying on half of his breath from creation. The current Huiyuhao is skinny, with an extremely thin and weak physique. His whole body is extremely dirty, and our patched clothes also emit a foul odor. Muscles are nothing more than necessary connections, but his skin is still extremely delicate and smooth, like crystal clear jade, and his eyes are even more colorful than the original work. If placed in a previous life, Huiyuhao's type is described as being thin and easily pushed down. The best candidate for a good young man and woman, but this is a world dominated by a feudal worldview. And what this brings to be precise, this is also true in the Duke's mansion. Although Huiyuhao is the illegitimate son of Duke Baihu, he still cannot hinder the group of humanoid creatures with abnormal hobbies in the Duke's mansion. It can only be said that some people with abnormal XPs are not just emerging in modern society, but there are more channels to expose them in modern society. Huiyuhao has to walk carefully, and there have been no less than 30 instances of wanting to molest him in the past 6 months alone. Fortunately, Huiyuhao is still clever, and with the enhanced vision and perception of his spiritual eyes, he can barely avoid these people without any problems. Anyway, he can still be considered the child of the Duke of White Tiger. They dare not openly engage in these dirty things, but it does not prevent them from secretly poking for some private opportunities. This cannot seal the extremely disgusting hearts of that group of humanoid creatures, adhering to the principle of destruction if not obtained. Well, to be precise, even if he got the chance, it would still be like this. Huiyuhao had already become numb to all sorts of disgusting words like male fox spirit, male bitch, lewd. Even the Duchess had the idea of trying to manipulate herself, using various means to slander and forcibly fasten his hat, which almost made Huiyuhao's eyes fail to protect. However, the one in the sky could allow Huiyuhao to have mental abnormalities, but other aspects would not allow it. This provided Huiyuhao with some unexpected help, but it is not worth being grateful, as the other party was only thinking for a purpose. This middle-aged old man was specially arranged by the Duchess to supervise, but in fact, he was the steward who tormented Huiyuhao and his mother and son. Secondly, he supervised the mother and son to prevent them from leaving the Duke's mansion. And the person in charge of supervision doesn't have to do anything, just be responsible for supervision. After all, the group of servants in the Duke's mansion is very large, and according to Huiyuhao's speculation, there are at least over 5,000 people. It is not a problem to assign a steward specifically to monitor the mother and son. However, Huiyuhao felt that the Duchess had arranged for one person to supervise the two, which was completely unnecessary. When I realized something was wrong at the age of 3, I repeatedly advised my mother and myself to leave. What is the persuasiveness of one's own words from childhood? In addition, the unique customs of love brain among people in Douluo continent. Anyway, which man would use a dagger as a token of affection? Even in the memories of Hui Yuhao's past life, in ancient times, the idea of directly confronting the dagger with the other person was to make it self-destructive, but how could he say this according to Hugo? The Tang God King should have noticed himself when he was just born. What new star is related to Tang men? Humph, it's just the result of him making a joke out of it. When I was 3 years old and almost had my eyes gouged out, I met the Duchess once and noticed a faint divine power in her mind. Who else could there be besides the Tang Divine King? Even Hui Yuhao believes that the death of the Duchess in the later stages of the original work should be related to the Tang God King. Although this divine power is so weak that even Hui Yuhao has complete confidence in using the power of creation to extinguish it, it is ultimately not feasible. I am still too weak now, without throwing tiles. But now this is not a solution. He must find an opportunity to forcibly take away his mother, otherwise he will only fall into that same dead end as his original self. Fortunately, unlike former Hui Yuhao, he now possesses a script, despite many different details and the power of creation that I don't quite understand myself. Although she dare not expose too many talents for cultivation in the Duke's mansion, otherwise with the terrifying bonus of the power of creation, the Duchess will definitely eliminate herself as a disaster. Although there is interference from the Tang God King, if he discovers something is wrong, it will be even worse. But even so, it's still much better than before, even though he has always followed the principle of concealing his innate soul power as a level 1 in the original work. No one would think that the innate soul power accompanied by spiritual eyes, a top-level spiritual essence and martial soul, is really only 1 level. If it weren't for malnutrition causing meridian blockage since childhood, could Hui Yuhao be a waste of innate soul power level 1? As far as Hui Yuhao is concerned, what he can come into contact with allows him to observe the veins inside his body very clearly. Compared with others, he can easily draw a conclusion. The innate soul power not only depends on the martial soul, but also on the physical fitness before awakening at the age of 6, and it also needs to occupy the head. It is not difficult to understand that the body shell is a container that carries the soul, while the martial soul is an outward transformation of the soul. Moreover, even if the innate soul power is only 1 level and insufficient, it is still the main martial soul. Hui Yuhao, who is light frequency, can enter the main body sect. The degree to which the ontological sect cherishes ontological martial soul masters is no less than the degree to which a normal college cherishes a genius soul master. Even if the ontology sect has already spoken harshly to the outside world, any soul master who possesses the ontology martial soul can be considered a member of their ontology. But the number of addresses that can be admitted to the sect each year is usually only about 10. Compared to other normal colleges, it can be said that it is pitiful that there are few, even though this super Douluo with a level 98 poison undead is still sitting there. This has also developed a personality of everyone in the ontological sect who is extremely protective of the calf as a whole. After all, there are only a dozen or so each year, and it is even rarer to find one that can awaken. Moreover, the current situation of Hui Yuhao is much better than that of the original work, and he even awakens his true body and martial soul at the beginning of the game. It goes without saying that he has to rely solely on his own weight to catch and cultivate himself as a good student to see what the situation is like. Since there are few people, it's okay to waste some resources, but it's obvious that the Duchess will not allow this kind of thing to happen. Hui Yuhao, an illegitimate son, was able to awaken a more noble physical martial soul than the White Tiger soul, and his talent was even more noble than the other 2 brothers of the White Tiger family. What do outsiders say? Isn't it just a joke for others? Moreover, the mother and son of Hui Yuhao were already seen as thorn in the flesh by the Duchess, and the Tang God King also needed to use this environment to cultivate Hui Yuhao's personality, causing him to develop deformities at this naive age in order to control himself. So both of Hui Yuhao's enemies chose one approach. Keep the news hidden and not leak it out. However, Hui Yuhao has known intelligence that it is impossible to be detected as long as he does not actively use the power of creation near gods above level 3. But Tang Shenwang is obviously the one above level 3. Omega, in recent years, Hui Yuhao has also gained a lot from his research on the power of creation and the rules of this world. Although his efficiency is particularly low, he is tormented by being confined to the Duke's mansion all day long, and naturally has very little time to study. Hui Yuhao's current plan is to find an opportunity to knock his mother unconscious, take him away from the Duke's mansion, and fabricate a white lie to persuade her. According to the original text, Hui Yuhao's cooking skills are the best under the melting ice, and his mother is not bad either. As long as he can escape from the Duke's mansion, he will not starve to death. Even in the worst-case scenario, if discovered by the Tang Divine King, he would directly drill into the Star Do forest and play in the wilderness to survive. After all, the destruction would be on top of him, and he wouldn't dare to run down and interfere directly. But if he played the move of the Divine World Inspector, it wouldn't be fun, so Hui Yuhao is also hesitating what to do. After thinking a lot, I came to my senses and didn't know if it was because I had done too much of this kind of thing, or because the power of creation had increased Hui Yuhao's spiritual power. While thinking about these things, I was working without any pressure. It can be said that I was putting in two things at once. Hurry up with the lewd things. Staying at the Duke's mansion is always about doing things, either investing time or physical effort. Working hours can't be a day off, but I'm a bit excited today, young master. Give you a chance to make me happy. Maybe you don't have to do it today. The idol supervisor looked at Hui Yuhao, who was thin and shabby, with tattered clothes that could not perfectly cover his delicate body. The tattered clothes on his chest revealed a large amount of delicate skin like white paper, and his fair and smooth handsome face was covered by a little bit of hair. The lustrous insects once again occupied the high ground in his mind. He stared at Hui Yuhao with a grin on his face, like a hungry jackal ready to eat Hui Yuhao, a small sheep that earned income but had delicious meat, in large chunks. Hui Yuhao didn't pay attention to him, but only focused on doing things on his own. He was used to this kind of thing and didn't have much to say about it. In this place, he still didn't dare to force the king to bow down, but he had reason to say that he couldn't win and didn't have the capital to negotiate. Because of this silence, treating it as not hearing is the only best choice that Hui Yuhao can currently make. As Hui Yuhao had imagined, the supervisor saw Hui Yuhao ignoring his obvious anger but not daring to forcefully take action and could only kick his left foot. He muttered to Hui Yuhao, "Damn it, slutty guy, what kind of disguise is it? Your slutty mother climbed up through this means. You're not born like this, you dare to ignore me. Today's workload is doubled." As expected by Hui Yuhao, he still dared not force it. This kind of thing is too damaging to his reputation. It took a lot of effort to get this job of supervising, torturing, Hui Yuhao, and he didn't want to easily lose it. Hui Yuhao, who was thin and small in stature, couldn't withstand his boat. He was kicked to the ground and hit the corner of his mouth on a wooden stake, oozing strands of blood. He struggled to prop himself up, stood up on the stake, and dragged his right leg, which had already been numbed by pain, to continue working silently without saying a word. He deeply understood that the painful howls of begging for mercy would only make these abusers more excited, and only silence, like a piece of cotton, would allow them to strike without making any sound, and their interest in him would be extinguished. They are these weak and humble little characters. Crying is useless. The sky gradually darkened, and the clouds were dyed red by the afterglow of the sunset. Only a slight light escaped the obstruction of the clouds and came to the ground, but what shone on were only withered and old yellow trees. "Ah, it seems like I went back a bit late today." Hui Yuhao limped along, dragging his injured right foot and stumbling on the way back, gazing at the distant sunset and sighing uncontrollably. The physical pain encountered by him could not constitute substantial torture, and he could endure it for a while. "Little beast, you forgot, right? You're going to kneel and kowtow when you see me. You guys go up and fight me." Hui Yuhao snapped back to his senses and said, "Damn it, why did Dai Huabin come here?" As the loyal dogleg beside Dai Huabin, he did not hesitate to fight fiercely against Hui Yuhao, a 7-year-old child, to please his master, without mercy. Hui Yuhao had to curl up his body with his head in his arms to defend himself and minimize higher damage as much as possible. Allow Dai Huabin's 2 henchmen to beat him severely. However, Hui Yuhao is not very worried either. After all, Tang San has long known about his identity as the son of his plane. He even plans to train me into a dog, and is willing to let me die. But this is just a cover-up, at least I won't die now. Ah, just endure it and it's over. Hui Yuhao comforted himself with this thought. I don't know how long it took for Hui Yuhao's hands to become numb from the beating, and even a slight sound of breakage could be heard. The pain all over his body continued to hit, and he really wanted to sleep at this moment. Hui Yuhao felt a divine force approaching him. It was obvious that this divine power was also the sea god power of Tang Xinluo. Indeed, he was afraid of killing me, so he sent the Duchess over, Hui Yuhao thought to himself, but he always felt something was wrong. Wait, how did this divine power come from the direction of home? Mom! When Hui Yuhao realized that something was wrong, Hui Yuner had already rushed over and tightly protected himself, allowing the 2 lackeys to beat him recklessly. It's over, I couldn't have been beaten to death, but Mom. Hui Yuhao was well aware of his pivotal position in the Tang Monk King's 10,000-year plan. He knew very well that his position could not be killed, but what about Hui Yuner? Hui Yuhao really wanted to protect his mother, but his hands and feet had already been beaten and his bones were still red, swollen, and broken. His reflex arc was no longer affected by the nerve's dullness and had significantly increased, making him disobedient. After that moment, Hui Yuhao even had the idea of self-destructing directly, but soon this idea was suppressed by reason. No, I still have a chance. The Tang Monk King will definitely take away his mother's soul. It's not possible to expose it now. If I go to the divine realm to kill the Tang God King, it will be my last chance. Hui Yuhao's previous life mentality was already very stable, and his 2 lives have forged a more stable mentality, so he can still maintain a certain level of rationality in this situation. Analyze the best way to handle the current situation. Before this happened, he knew that it was not possible to continue like this, so he stopped moving and lay quietly, maintaining his strength. Tears streamed out of his eyes, and slowly crawled down his face from the corner of his eye, finally landing on the cold grass. Is this fate? Hui Yuhao's emotions had already reached the brink of collapse, and fate played tricks on him. Even though he had tried his best to use all means, he still encountered Dai Huabin's poisonous hand. So much so that it also accelerated the actions of Tang Xinluo. Is this caused by Hui Yuhao? Yes, it's not. Is Hui Yuhao doing better than that one? This is still an unknown fact. It was the result of the previous generation of Hui Yuhao sacrificing himself to fight for it. Therefore, Hui Yuhao can only win and cannot lose. Hui Yuner remained motionless and protected Hui Yuhao. Even if it was guided by the Tang God King. Even though she is not actually her true child, she is her own mother. For Hui Yuhao, the same applies. At this moment, Hui Yuhao was helplessly held by Hui Yuner and couldn't do anything. He could only watch Hui Yuner suffer harm, until the warm blood on Hui Yuner's body flowed into streams on his scarred body, until she no longer had the strength to support her body. Puff. Hui Yuner ultimately didn't hold on, and blood poured into his throat from his lungs, eventually spitting out. The warm blood is like this. Flowing onto the face after the meeting, it flowed into Hui Yuhao's eyes along the bridge of his nose, but Hui Yuhao still kept his eyes racing to look at his mother escape. Good. Good to survive. Hui Yuner struggled to open his mouth, full of blood, and with his emerald black eyes, he stared straight at Hui Yuhao's pale face, spitting out these hesitant words. At the end of his life, he seemed to have finally awakened, but was it a bit too late? A late apology can never make up for everything, just like the late justice will never be justice. But it's always better than nothing. A dog leg felt that something was wrong and quickly reported to the young master through the book garden www.jiaozuiyuan.com. Young master, it seems like we've gone too far. The maid seems to have died. Dai Huabin was also surprised in his heart. His mother had given orders to torture them, but they must not be killed. But even so, it only made him unhappy for a moment. He was the Duchess's biological son, and at most, he was beaten up by his own mother. She couldn't bear to die on her own, how could she blame him? Who would care about the death of a maid? Tang Monk King. ? It's almost time, let's go. Dai Huabin glanced at the mother and son tonight, leaving with some joy in his heart. A few dog legs obediently followed over. One of them kicked Huiyun'er's body hard before leaving. For these domestic slaves, this kind of dog-fighting behavior is really enjoyable for them. Moreover, the person who bullies can be considered as half the head of their household, and suppressing them brings them greater happiness. The cold wind howled past, mercilessly slapping the mother and son who were suffering hard. Huiyun'er confirmed death on July 18, 2023, at the age of 26, according to the Douluo calendar. With the physical death of Huiyun'er, the Tang Divine King also began to take action. He used the divine power that had previously guided Huiyun'er here, carrying Huiyun'er's soul towards the divine realm. However, Huiyuhao was unable to reveal this. Unable to resist, I had to watch my mother's soul being taken away by others. Previously, I only listened to others recounting the evil words and deeds of the Tang God King, rather than experiencing them firsthand. But now his biological experience has torn his heart and lungs, and he is powerless. He can only stare at the road where Dai Huabin came, and the sky connected to it. Chapter 3. See God runs away in wrath on the road is 6ks. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, the soft halo resembles a mother's hand, and golden clouds accompany the towering palace. A figure draped with soft and beautiful Han hair stood quietly among the clouds, frowning and gazing into the distance. Damn it! The owner of the figure clenched his fists and hammered towards the nearby stone pillar, his eyes pointing towards the projection mirror of the Divine Realm card in front of him. This person is the Tang God King, who is both the Sea God and the Shura God of a generation, as well as the Ice and Jade Pure Tang. The Dai family's bunch of miscellaneous dogs are really a hindrance, causing me to have to advance my plan ahead of time. If it weren't for these dogs, such accidents wouldn't have happened earlier. Now the direction of the son of Qiyun cannot be locked in the next guidance plan, and it will become increasingly difficult. Now that this child is still in his early years, it is easiest to shape his personality by using the environment to influence other personalities. It will be even more difficult to cultivate him into a good son.in.law tool, who is obedient to me during his 10,000 years in the divine realm. The Tang Monk King not only increased his cultivation, but also his ambition. And he, the Tang Monk King, is not a lazy person. For 10,000 years, his control and understanding of human relationships and human nature have reached a very high level. He knows well how to cultivate a person who has no thoughts of his own and completely becomes a loyal dog under his command. That is to deprive him of his ability to think independently step by step, while also allowing him to possess foolish kindness and trample on his self-esteem step by step, tearing apart his personality and erasing all his autonomous consciousness. Finally, he threatened with the only thing he cared about. No matter who it is, as long as it is an intelligent creature, once their personal dignity is trampled upon, it will trigger a mood called anger. It will guide people towards extremes, but at the same time, it will also give them great courage and unwavering strength to move forward. Simply put, it means reducing IQ by 999, increasing courage by 999, and increasing strength by 20. Of course, it can be quite difficult to trigger such anger, but once triggered, it becomes uncontrollable, just like the socialist revolution in capitalist countries. A single spark can start a prairie fire. But what if a person's dignity is completely shattered, ground into powder, and shattered to the point where even the crumbs are not counted, and the powder is not even visible? Then he will lose his self-esteem and aspire to become an aimless wandering soul corpse, no longer hating or persisting like the Lich King, with the twisted obsession in his heart. Even if he already knows it's wrong, he will deceive himself into being right. This understanding may be too abstract, but Leo Tolstoy had already clearly explained this extremely simple and easy to understand social phenomenon in his Resurrection. Everyone has their own outlook on life, living in their own world, like an incomprehensible murderer or prostitute in the eyes of normal people. What they do is despicable, shameless, and vulgar. However, in their own world, they may not be ashamed, but rather proud. If you warn them, they will actually think that you are abnormal and disgusting. There are two more types of this. Some people may realize it in their hearts, but their minds still need to continue deceiving them, because people always want to keep living. Therefore, I will constantly come up with many reasons to explore and live for myself. And another type is the difference between pure thinking and ordinary people, which is usually due to childhood education or distorted concepts. Similar to a child mill. The essence of the two is the difference between cognition and the appearance of normal people. But even so, they all have the dignity that belongs to them in their own worldview. The Tang Divine King once again drew up a plan for 10,000 years in his mind, and the constant lust in his mind made him climax, but the reality was not as he had hoped. As soon as he thought about these things, he still couldn't help but take out a gray-shaped sphere with white light shining inside. With a disdainful snort on his face, he muttered to the sphere. "Douluo, Douluo, why don't you fulfill me and create a son of fate to resist me? I am a pure and virtuous person, and I will make the world a better place," referring to completely becoming the Tang family's continent and the shape of the Tang God King. At this point, he sighed and said, "Anyway, no matter how hard you try to stop it, it's useless. Even if you can block my perception of him at this moment, your power is ultimately limited. When I find him, your child will eventually become my chess piece, haha." At this moment, the Tang God King will attribute the inability to perceive Huiyuhao entirely to the Douluo plane using its own power. But in reality, it's impossible to fight against the Douluo plane. Douluo realm deep in the Youhu forest. Huiyuhao was running frantically at full risk. Continuously running towards Xinluo city not far from the Duke's mansion. Although Xinluo city is very close to the Duke's mansion, Huiyuhao can only choose him. Huiyuner's death did not make Huiyuhao feel discouraged, but rather strengthened his beliefs. After confirming that the Tang God King had taken away the soul of Huiyuner, Huiyuhao used his creative power to mark those enemies, then concealed his whereabouts and moved towards Xinluo city with Huiyuner's body. Along the way, he found a feng shui treasure trove that he thought was good for Huiyuner to bury. Although he knew that Huiyuner's soul had already been taken away by the Tang God King, leaving behind nothing but an empty shell, he still couldn't let the body of his mother, who had protected him and died, lie scattered across the mountains and fields. He found a deep forest with beautiful scenery that he thought was good, and buried Huiyuner here. The cemetery would pick up leaks and even have no epitaphs, only a small mound-shaped drum and a standing flat long stone, telling the story of an old friend buried here. Huiyuhao had no extra time or energy to arrange excessively. He just lowered his eyes towards the tombstone of Zikuan, with rosy eyes but no more tears flowing down. His inner emotions were strange, distorted, and chaotic, with both sadness and hatred towards the impermanence of fate, a lack of understanding towards his mother, and a sudden release of his feelings and satisfaction towards him. In the end, this series of complex emotions depicts his current mood. Although strictly speaking he is not his child, he is indeed his mother. Even if he has numerous flaws and all kinds of bad things, he will still give everything for his own child, even if it is his life. Huiyuhao wants to stay a little longer, but it's time to leave. He cannot do the extremely double standard of tearing his own daughter in half while being pure and pure like the Tang God King. He will not let his mother lie dead in the wilderness. After bidding farewell, he continued to run in the forest, not knowing how long he had been running and how tired his body had become numb. Alas, there's nothing we can do. The stock of creation power today is not enough. Hu Yuhao was very helpless and had to camp nearby, camping in the wilderness. Although I possess the power of creation, my body's capacity is limited and my mastery is not enough. I also need to keep a portion for hiding, so I quickly used it. But my body is really poor. If it weren't for the power of creation forcibly hanging him, he would have died a long time ago. But he couldn't figure it out. Even though his starving skin was exposed, he couldn't figure out why his skin was so good. He could only attribute all the credit to things in creation, but the more he thought about it, the more he wanted to curse. The reason is nothing else. Just like the old saying of the society in which he lived in a previous life. Beauty in no matter which card he played, most of them were rocket, but it would be suicide if he played alone. Hu Yuhao couldn't help but recall when he first arrived. At first, he didn't realize that it was a good thing for his martial soul to awaken early, and he could study the creation and world rules in advance. Now, when he thinks about it, it's really unlucky. Being treated like this 5 years earlier than his predecessor Hu Yuhao is not a pleasant experience in my heart. I don't know whether it was the Duke's mansion or when the Tang God King Hu Yuhao was 1.2 years old, he wouldn't have been treated like this. Ah, forget it, it's all over, it doesn't matter anymore. It's better to be optimistic about the present and plan for future actions. Originally, Hu Yuhao was preparing to wait until he was 8 years old to take action, but everything that happened disrupted Hu Yuhao's plan and he had to proceed ahead of schedule. Speaking of swinging, he used both hands and feet to climb up a nearby tall ginkgo tree, secured himself with a rope, and entered the Sea of Spirit. The Sea of Spirit, as the name suggests, is a special space for storing spiritual power. This is what most soul masters know about it. But at this moment, Hu Yuhao doesn't need to know much about it, and at the same time, he can't do much about it. After all, even the spiritual soul masters don't have a thorough understanding of it. Of course, it may also be because there haven't been many powerful spiritual soul masters. Most people only care about the capacity of spiritual power. After all, breaking through the realm that requires spiritual benefits is beyond the reach of most soul masters, and its practicality naturally decreases, so there is no in-depth understanding of it by most people. Hu Yuhao is not very worried about the gaps and shortcomings in this area. Now, he only needs to wait for the arrival of Tianmeng with peace of mind. When he appears, there will naturally be a spiritual expert to teach him how to use it. What does Heavenly Dream count as? Only Alex is the real Thai, okay. A very faint divine sense can reach the peak level of Mu'en. It is hard to imagine his strength during his heyday, and it is speculated that his strength in the middle stage of the Divine King is good. And its greater value lies in its other two disciples, Long Haochen and Shinkaier, whose strength has also reached the mid to late stage of the Divine King in the current timeline. Although the word God is really cheap and should be the endorsement of the so-called immortal in this world, the rules it can master cannot be ignored. As for the soul technique and spiritual detection on Tianmeng's body. Are you joking? This thing doesn't belong to him originally. Heavenly dreams can become a million-year soul, and beasts are all favored by Douluo plane alignment. Their favor is for the arrival of Hu Yuhao. Although it may sound a bit narcissistic, the fact is that it is. Spiritual detection and other things are just given by Douluo, otherwise why doesn't he have so many ice silkworms? It can be said that Hu Yuhao, as the son of Qi Yun, has gathered the love of the entire continent. Alas, let's take advantage of this time to organize some information. Hu Yuhao then integrated the spiritual energy in his mind into a bookshelf and twisted out a pen to start recording. Anyway, Hu Yuhao also comes from another person who values technology and possesses the power of creation. Coupled with his perseverance and efforts, commonly known as cheats, it is still necessary to be slightly simpler to understand the essence of this world. But when I think of technology, Hu Yuhao has a big brain. Douluo's technology is really ruthless when it says I'm crooked, high, and low at the same time. It can only be said to be extremely outrageous. Of course, this is only what Hui Yuhao has seen and heard so far. Little did he know that when he saw the soul guide with his own eyes, he would be even more shocked by how ruthless this technology tree was. From this perspective, the infinite resource of soul power can be considered as limiting the technological development of the entire Douluo world from a certain perspective. Soul power and body are linked, but spiritual power is not. Its existence is more abstract, bound to the soul, and even a new special space has emerged, which is the Sea of Spirit. And another thing that is bound to the soul is the martial soul, but the result that Hui Yuhao has researched with his current strength is obviously not enough. In any case, he has to wait for his spiritual power to reach the spiritual abyss realm before he can come into contact with it. Thinking of his martial soul, Hui Yuhao was quite curious. Previously, Hui Yuhao's martial soul was a spiritual attribute of his spirit eye, which evolved from the beast martial soul demon white tiger. However, in his exploration, he found that his spirit eye had no connection with the demon white tiger. Although the blood of the evil eye white tiger still flowed in his bloodline, the main body was dominated by the power of creation. This has made Hui Yuhao's brain grow bigger. He didn't know much before, but now the timeline has changed too much, which may have a significant impact on the future. The things that Hu Go told him were almost all about the rules of the plot, and there were very few. As for the memory fragment of Hu Go in the Sea of Spirit, for him before the age of 12, this was simply torture, especially after Hui Yuhao's martial soul awakened at the age of 6. Two memories overlap directly, which is equivalent to double torture. It can only be said that fate manipulates people's memories. All the pure memories on the fragments are useless, only memories aged 1.12. Fortunately, the power on it can still be used. This led Hui Yuhao to come up with a pending idea. Thinking of this, Hui Yuhao realized another and more important point is that he is currently in an extremely awkward situation. Due to the origin of his soul, from the evil demon white tiger to creation, his martial soul quality also came to creation. And how noble is Genesis? Will he need a soul beast to be his soul ring? Obviously, it is impossible. He discovered this 2.5 years ago. The soul ring of creation can only condense the body itself to materialize the power of rules it contains. To accelerate the speed of aggregation, one can only speed up its aggregation by understanding the rules, but all of these require a long time. Hui Yuhao conservatively estimated that his first soul ring would take at least 5 years to solidify. On the college side, he can't go to any of them now, not only because of his age, but also because he has to wait for the cohesion, which is causing him great pain. Secondly, there is a Tang God King in the sky staring at him, wanting to moisten the sun and moon. There are no doors. With his current strength, he is completely unable to support the founding power and hide his breath to the sun and moon. Besides, let's not mention the soul beasts and wild beasts in the middle from Star Luo to sun and moon. The two countries are already in a stage of tension. Wouldn't border defense be established? Crossing these border defenses is now more difficult for Hui Yuhao than reaching the sky. However, when he thought of the border defense of Xinluo, Hui Yuhao's lips couldn't help but show a playful smile. Anyway, he was also born in the Duke's mansion, and the code name of the White Tiger Duke is a border general. This also gave him the opportunity to take a glance at the military map, and with the powerful memory and influence of his spiritual eyes and martial soul, he remembered the entire map. And at that time, those who had just seen the content were all stunned, and a few words suddenly popped up in their hearts. Fuck me, Majino. Yes, the Xinluo Empire, in the Mingdo Mountains, has the same military deployment in defense as the Majino defense line. However, if you use your head to directly use the two greatest advantages of the soulmate's high mobility and high permanence, you can bypass the temptation of this layer of defense and sneak attack around its rear to make this layer of defense line almost useless. This world can be considered a fantasy world no matter what. There is something called a space storage ring. If it were placed in Huiyuhao's original world, it would be an incredible thing. It can almost be said that it perfectly solves the biggest problem of transportation, greatly increasing the stability and safety guarantee of transportation. At the same time, due to the lack of large-scale high-precision technology deployment and large-scale machinery in this era, war naturally does not have tanks, but soul masters in war almost replace this position and are often more useful than tanks. Huiyuhao can only say that no matter which world, as long as there is a place where intelligent civilization exists, the Maginot Line will definitely exist once. Fortunately, although Xinluo's Maginot Defense Line is not very useful, the opponent's brain is clearly not enough. How can we say that the Lying Dragon and Phoenix Chicks are on par with each other? To be precise, it cannot be said that the tactics of the Emperor and Empress, the god of war Orange, are still very strong, but most people really can't think of something as advanced as Lightning Station. And under normal circumstances, it is already not easy to use this tactic multiple times in a war. After all, you can't treat the other party's military command and strategic planning as fools. After getting stabbed, you can't still not know how you were stabbed, can you? Once the drawbacks of this thing are discovered, it will not be used like this again in the future, and of course, it cannot be ruled out that it may be used in conjunction with other tactics. As for whether they will accept Huiyuhao as an outsider after arriving at the Sun and Moon Empire, he is still quite confident, with Huo Guai's talent, combined with his knowledge in his past life and this extremely special martial soul. It seems like he was born for a soul guide. Spiritual power is stronger than others, and one can learn for a longer time. Spiritual detection can see many details clearly and learn faster. Soul guides themselves have a natural talent. Creation, and if the metal is not enough, one can directly pinch it without buying it. Isn't this just for the soul guide? In addition, the sun and moon are much rarer than Shrek. After all, not everyone is the first academy in the mainland, only raising monsters. Then he was taken out by Xuanzi, the elder of the Holy Spirit sect, and killed in a wave. Another noteworthy aspect is the political impact that his identity can bring. Although Huiyuhao does not understand political tactics, he can still achieve it at a slight level. Of course, the determination of the sun and moon is not as good as I imagined. This is a world rather than a novel written for seductive authors, and there will eventually be differences. After arriving at the sun and moon, Huiyuhao should still receive some kind of surveillance, but it's not a big deal. Thinking about it in this way, there may be some garbage in the sun and moon, and Shrek may have some good places, but this does not affect the final goal of deciding to go to the sun and moon. His ultimate goal, including his mission to come to this world, has been established from the very beginning. Revenge. Revenge the deity who plays with the fate of others recklessly. The soul guide is what Huiyuhao most wants to touch, and technology is the primary productive force. This statement holds true in any small world that is normally born among humans. Even when placed on Douluo, these two works, including the materialist view of history and the theory of surplus value, can be said to have strong adaptability. Of course, due to differences in worldviews and cultural figures, there are still some differences, but ultimately they are not significant. Thinking of this, Huiyuhao felt a bit regretful and went to the book garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com. Alas, unfortunately, we can't bring capital over. Thinking of Xuanzi, Huiyuhao had another wonderful idea. I don't know how many people would die without Huiyuhao's reminder this time. I'm afraid he didn't even participate in the competition. Thinking of this, Huiyuhao couldn't help but show a wicked smile. This is not considered Huiyuhao's bad behavior, it is just a factual explanation. Shrek was already a tool surnamed Tang, his first backyard on Douluo continent. He couldn't have deliberately reminded the enemy, could he? How about going directly to the starry forest? Huiyuhao had this idea in his mind, but it was quickly deleted. From the news learned by Huiyuhao, it can be foreseen that the Tang Monk King is most likely not being destroyed, or that the supervision is not sufficient. With my relationship with the Emperor's lucky beast, I'm afraid I wouldn't have met her even if I had wandered around the outer entrance in the past. I'll really send her then. He doesn't want to perform another love sacrifice, unable to resurrect but merging into a storyline of Stitch monsters. After thinking about it again, I could theoretically be considered an upgraded version of the extraterrestrial demon, which made me even more troubled. Currently, I don't even know what this thing is really useful for. Hui Yuhao's head is big, and he doesn't want to think about it anymore. He wants to go to bed quickly. I want to leave these things to him in the future. But he can't tolerate this idea anymore, otherwise the problem will never be solved. Day after day the morning breeze gently brushed against Hui Yuhao's cheeks, and crystal-clear dewdrops slid down the leaves and hit Hui Yuhao's head. Scared, Hui Yuhao quickly woke up, thinking that it was some soul beast that was making a sound at him. If it weren't for being tied with a rope, it was likely that it would have fallen off. The sunrise is also about to rise, which also indicates that Hui Yuhao's new journey is about to begin. Chapter 4. A new start starting from Xinluo City 6ks. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, in the mountains and wilderness, a slender blue-haired boy was quickly shuttling through the woods. This person is Hui Yuhao, who just escaped from the Duke's mansion last night, but his figure and appearance have changed greatly, and it is completely impossible to see what a 7-year-old child should look like. And this is also the main reason why Hui Yuhao chose to camp outdoors. Although his experience at the White Tiger Duke's mansion was very tragic, he is still considered the Duke's son, and his disappearance will inevitably lead to a large-scale search. Moreover, Hui Yuhao used his creative power to evade the detection of the Tang God King. In terms of Tang Shenhuang's extremely controlling personality, he will definitely try his best to find himself. So the concealment of appearance is particularly important, at least not to be constantly watched by him, otherwise how else would he study the use of the power of creation? More importantly, breaking through the realm of soul ring cohesion in creation requires an understanding of the rules of the world, and this time is often extremely long. As for why am I so fast? Hui Yuhao attributed his credit to the legacy of his predecessors. In order to cover up his appearance, Hui Yuhao found a hidden patch of grass in a nearby stream at the beginning of the morning. He opened his spiritual eyes and Genesis dual detection to ensure that there were no large wild animals nearby before starting to move. He first condensed an irregular crystal with melancholic vitality and dazzling emerald green light in his left hand, and then inserted it into the ground. On his right hand, a sharp metal piece resembling a small knife appeared. Hui Yuhao put his knife into the water to keep it cool and wet, then untied his clothes and hung it on a nearby tree top. He stood by the river without hanging it for a lifetime. The azure eyes looked solemnly at the small knife-shaped object on his right hand, shaking his lower head as if he had made a decision. With his back pricked and biting tightly, the small knife-shaped crystals penetrated into Hui Yuhao's body. The wound was not deep, but a thin layer. He slowly began to slide upwards from his forearm. The pain also intensified here, but his movements did not become slow as a result. He continued to act swiftly and quickly completely shed the skin on his entire left hand. Despite his quick movements, his face remained pale. His entire left hand and nearby body were covered in blood and bone flowing downwards. The metal solid, resembling a small knife, is somewhat sharp, but essentially it is still just an unpolished piece of metal with grooves of different sizes. Occasionally, during cutting, Hui Yuhao's muscles would also be torn off by him. But this is also a matter of helplessness. At this moment, the green crystal began to take action, and waves of pure and rich life energy enveloped Hui Yuhao. Hui Yuhao used Genesis to blow him, allowing him to come to the bone through his muscles and catalyze growth. Hui Yuhao's half-sculpted body skin has completely peeled off, and his body has grown a whole circle in this short half-hour. The green crystal was also emitting a strong breath of life, constantly rushing into his body to catalyze growth. It seemed that he didn't think the speed was fast enough. He vigorously raised his right hand and grabbed the green crystal, only inserting it into his chest. But the young man's medical level is clearly not enough, and a mouthful of rich blood spurts out from his mouth. Damn it! It's inserted awkwardly, it's inserted into the lungs. Time is not just a river, but it seems to flow continuously in response to time. The river in the lower half of this small river is already dyed red by a bright red liquid. The morning sun shone on the young man's sorrowful and pale face, and due to the reason of just entering the village, the air still maintained its winter temperature. Hui Yuhao exhaled heavily, emitting wisps of white mist vapor. After everything was completed, Hui Yuhao half knelt on the ground, struggling to support his entire body with one hand. After a moment of rest, he wanted to stand up and pick up his clothes, but he felt a bit uncomfortable. This returned to the physical operation of a teenager, where he stumbled and fell. Fortunately, the ground was very soft and he didn't have any new wounds. He could smell the fragrance of the earth's soil mixed with fragrant grass and spring water. The continuously flowing stream is clear and bottomless, even though it is still flowing endlessly. It can still reflect the handsome face of Hui Yuhao lying on the ground. Hui Yuhao is a bit addicted and wants to sleep, but time won't wait for him. He stood up and picked up the patched and tattered clothes, which were as ragged as a rag. Perhaps they were too old, and even though his body had grown so much, it could still fit. He was contemplating what he currently had. The best choice to defeat Tang Shenwang is the power of creation. Only through the absolute power of the founding can victory be achieved. Either you have to obtain the Divine King level inheritance, but obviously, kindness and evil are not found in the Douluo world, and there is no intention of life and destruction, let alone Tang Shenwang. Although this guy kept saying in front of Xiaowu that he wanted to find a successor to accompany him out to play, he was actually unwilling to give up his power. If using the creation world, he can choose to spend hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of years to understand the creation world, and when the time is ripe, he can kill the divine realm and only take the head of a certain ice and jade pure divine king. But this is a bit too far and too late, which does not match the task assigned to him by Hua Guo. He can only choose to abandon it and choose a more adventurous method. Of course, even if it were for Hui Yuhao to choose him, he would still choose a more adventurous method. Excessive stability and comfort are meaningless. The life he pursues requires a certain exciting process, and excessive pursuit of results is bound to be dull and tasteless. Hui Yuhao looked at his hungry stomach and quickened his pace of action. It was noon when Hui Yuhao found a mountain stream located in the deep mountains but not far from Xinluo city. At the top was a small waterfall. Perhaps because it was spring, the water flow was not turbulent, so Hui Yuhao could use his expertise to fish. That's right, Hui Yuhao is preparing to implement his old method of selling fish. However, there is no other way. I am running away from the Duke's mansion, not only without spending money, but also without the white tiger dagger used to kill the mad baboon alone. It can be said that I am extremely poor. Although Genesis can directly condense rare metals like soul coins, Hui Yuhao currently cannot condense such delicate items. As for why not just pinch rare metals and sell them directly? Are you a fool, Bai Tuo? A little kid used so much money all at once, it's strange not to be robbed. Plus so many rare metals, where did you get them from? In the long run, some people will definitely doubt it. Instead of taking on unnecessary risks, Hui Yuhao might as well stick to his old business of selling fish. Selling rare metals can only be seen as the source of the first bucket of gold, or as an occasional special adventure. Hui Yuhao looked around to prevent any soul beasts or wild beasts from appearing nearby. After all, it was a deep mountain forest. It wouldn't be good if a soul beast took him away at night. Secondly, Hui Yuhao currently has no fixed residence and needs to find a place to settle down. There are not only soul beasts but also wild beasts in the world. Raising soul beasts is extremely difficult, but wild beasts are much simpler compared to them. Therefore, The meat source for the lower-class people is almost all domesticated wild beasts that have been domesticated into livestock. The cost is relatively low, but even so, they are not able to touch meat many times a year. Water Curtain Cave. Maybe it's because of his Xinluo martial soul. Hui Yuhao's vision is much higher than that of a normal person. At a glance, the cave in the waterfall was discovered. Good guy, I'm about to become the Monkey King, Hui Yuhao joked to himself, but it was also an unexpected gain. Then he climbed up the cave along the grooves on the stone wall. Entering the cave, what catches the eye is a pitch-black and open cave. Although it's a bit bigger than I expected, I don't have a choice. I'm so poor now that I have to catch grilled fish myself, let alone where I live. In addition, the sales location is still in Xinluo City, so the housing prices are probably not lower than in my previous life. After taking care of the accommodation, Hui Yuhao's sailor condensed a sharp iron fork-shaped metal, transforming into a generation of sea kings. Oh, no, more precisely, it was the River King, starting the classic fork fish process. He raised his hand to accumulate strength, through a breath of synthesis, and with each shot, a swimming fish would fall. For this basic material cohesion, Hui Yuhao is now able to easily grasp it. Douluo's basic physical concepts are somewhat similar, but not entirely identical, to the world he is in. The molecules of their world are almost not subject to conversion by forces other than soul power. After a long time, Hui Yuhao couldn't help but marvel at the practicality of Xinluo martial soul, which can be used for stir-frying, catching fish, and fighting. It can be said that it is omnipotent. As the sky gradually darkened, Hui Yuhao's materials were ready and it was time to enter Xinluo City. Arriving at the gate of Xinluo City, what caught the eye was a huge wall stretching for thousands of miles. The city gate and wall were filled with patrolling soldiers, each standing straight and with a majestic expression. There were 6 soldiers at the entrance, 2 of whom were responsible for inspecting large goods, and the remaining citizens were responsible for security work. And one of the symbols wearing armor caught Hui Yuhao's attention. It was obvious that the symbol was the portrait of the white tiger, indicating that he was the white tiger family represented by Dai Hao. Hui Yuhao couldn't help but feel sorry for Emperor Xinluo Su Jiawei, who, as the ruler of a country, could not fully control the army. Seeing this scene, Hui Yuhao also had a magical idea in his heart. The Douluo Plain, which is far away in the divine realm, is currently being imprisoned by Tang San in a tiny space. However, despite this, it is still impossible to isolate his connection with his own plane. Originally, he just threw the founder to Hui Yuhao, and then became a hands-off shopkeeper, thinking to himself that throwing him such a big cheat could not have cooled down, could it? The Douluo Plain is the founding seed that thinks so. The only one in each universe, representing the origin of a universe, possesses the most powerful power. Even if it is not recognized and only possessed, it is enough to make an ordinary person cultivate a divine king or above. The Douluo Plain also thinks the same way. He is not clear about the actual function of this thing, he only knows it is very strong. The reason is that the huge spiritual gold in the Star Dough forest was an unexpected product of his research. The powerful force can cause people to be corroded and changed accordingly, but this is currently only for carbon-based organisms, and the existence of the plane is no longer the case for non-living organisms. At the level of the plane, the concept of life no longer exists. They are the embodiment of the will of a region, and the higher the level of development of organisms in this plane, the greater their power will also expand. To a certain extent, one can reach the divine star and even transcend the divine realm. But this implementation is often random, that is, looking at the face. Under normal circumstances, the influence of facial will is often not significant, and this move makes most facial wills extremely simple. Well, to put it bluntly, it can be called a fool. I completely did not consider that the Tang God King could even calculate for an immature child, or underestimated his desire for control. He held on to this idea in the original work until the last step when he was completely devoured and replaced by Tang Hao, realizing that it was a big mistake. When he discovered it, he imagined his first child, Huiyuhao, but unfortunately did not convey this message. A plane is effortless in forcefully using its origin to impact the divine realm and save that message, but unfortunately, the divine realm at that time had already been swept away by the turbulence of time and space. He didn't want him to be angry and resentful, so he fused everything he had and created the last son of luck. The Dark King. Unfortunately, even so, he still couldn't get rid of it and even made a wedding dress for the other party, so he had to hold a grudge and end up. But now it is different from the past. Due to the changes that occurred in Huiyuhao, the Douluo plane inferred this news in advance through the behavior of Tang Sanwang. For the control and observation of Douluo continent, they became more meticulous and soon reached the position of Huiyuhao. The seed of creation is also given to him by the Douluo plane, and it itself retains a certain level of creation. Finding Huiyuhao based on this can be said to be extremely simple, relaxed, and enjoyable. This year's Shura divine realm is so vicious that it wants to directly grasp a plane and turn me into his backyard. I didn't expect that everyone had already reached this point and discovered the son of this generation's luck. However, that child did not disappoint my expectations. Let me continue to push the tide for you. Huiyuhao walked up to the soldiers, but it was obvious that these soldiers did not care much about Huiyuhao, a small and unremarkable merchant. Without conducting too much inspection, I made a record and put Huiyuhao inside. Entering the city, what catches the eye is an endless sea of people constantly flowing. It looked very crowded, with the shouting of vendors mixed with the communication between pedestrians, making it very lively. But it has nothing to do with Huiyuhao. He shuttled through the crowd, constantly searching for a suitable place to set up a stall. There were so many people, but he seemed out of place. An inexplicable sense of loneliness arose in Huiyuhao's heart. After Huiyuhao's birth mother died in this world, no one would know him and care about him anymore. Even as a traveler, he couldn't help but feel a sense of loneliness and solitude, clearly walking on the bustling and extraordinary street. It's a wonderful feeling to be walking alone amidst the hustle and bustle of life, but it's better to be open-minded. The crowd on the street is busy making a living, while the task that supports him to continue moving forward is also revenge. There are almost no people in Douluo's class who can reach his level of knowledge, and there is no lower level who can think about life philosophy like him. Livelihoods occupy most of their energy and time, and thinking becomes meaningless. This destined Huiyuhao to be completely incompatible with them. The liveliness belongs to them, I just feel it's noisy. Huiyuhao did not last long, and this state quickly came to his senses. Anyway, this is the path chosen by Huiyuhao himself. Even if the road ahead is full of thorns and no one has stepped on it, he must still move forward. People always have to pay for their actions. Huiyuhao first found a fish pond owner, sold some things, made some money, and went to buy some equipment first. Thinking of this, Huiyuhao easily controlled the power of creation, condensed some rare metals, and walked towards the blacksmith shop. Soon, near the Star Luo Royal Academy, Huiyuhao was stunned by a simple grilled fish stall. He first checked the seasoning well. Actually there doesn't seem to be anything to check, except for salt. Huiyuhao is not too panicked, he is still very confident in his culinary skills below Rongyan Bing. Then he opened his spiritual eyes and used them to roast fish. In no time, the strong aroma had already drifted out. It has to be said that this is much more than the previous clamor. Soon, a group of customers gathered in front of Huiyuhao's grilled fish stall. "Little brother, how do you sell this grilled fish?" a young man wearing gray-white fragrant shoulder clothes asked first. Huiyuhao was a bit excited and said, "Wow, it's from the Star Luo Royal Academy. I can't help but pull some wool." Huiyuhao politely responded to him, "Big brother, grilled fish costs 1 silver coin per piece." Huiyuhao is quite confident in his cooking skills, and even if it sells a bit more expensive, there will definitely be someone to buy it. And the fact also proved that his idea was not wrong, and soon the young man paid for it. This is still Huiyuhao's first transaction in this world. Unable to help but feel a little excited, he took the silver coin and put it into the prepared cloth bag. And the others watched as the first person to eat crabs. The grilled fish is golden overall, with a faint oil flow, and a rich aroma constantly spraying out from the fish body. When the teeth collided with the grilled fish, there was even a slight clicking sound. The fish skin had already been grilled crispy, but there was no burn at all. Under the crispy and tender fish skin was fresh and juicy fish meat. Although there were not too many seasonings, it was full of a unique flavor. After taking the first bite, he quickly swallowed the remaining part as well. People around him also took out currency to make purchases when they saw their reaction. Soon, the first wave of grilled fish was looted, and Hui Yuhao also began making the second wave of grilled fish. In just a moment's time, Hui Yuhao's grilled fish stall was surrounded by an overwhelming crowd. Because the aroma of Hui Yuhao's grilled fish stall was permeated, just seeing it made people unable to stop, arousing the craving insects in their taste buds to growl and protest, falling straight into the temptation of delicious food. As more and more people gathered around him, Hui Yuhao could no longer keep up, and the number of people gathered was unexpected. The young man who was the first to buy grilled fish once again squeezed into the crowd and shouted, "The price of each fish has tripled. Give me 4." As the first person shouted like this, the people around them also began to constantly increase their prices to buy. The goods selling seemed to have turned into bidding, and as the price continued to rise, the price finally came to a terrifying golden soul coin. You should know that a gold soul coin is enough for an ordinary family to live for several months. Hui Yuhao was also greatly flattered. He had thought that his cooking skills were excellent and he would sell quickly, but he never expected such a situation to occur. Unlike former Hui Yuhao's purpose of selling grilled fish, former Hui Yuhao's main focus was still on cultivation, while Hui Yuhao did not need it. The inability to obtain soul rings meant that he could only stabilize at level 10 first. Although he could use the power of creation to pinch one, it was too blatant and was determined to be sent by the Tang God King. Therefore, at this stage, his main goal is only to make money. I couldn't help but marvel at the strength of the wealthy in my heart. I'm not doing all the work on my hands anymore and I'm working even harder as time passed. Grilled fish were baked one after another, but Hui Yuhao did not reduce the quality of the grilling due to the increase in the number of people. It is precisely because Hui Yuhao knows the importance of word of mouth. After all, he has to stay here for 5 years before he can find Tianmeng. However, Hui Yuhao also knew that this price was only due to his first day of arrival, and if he pushed it back, the price would definitely decrease. There are only 2 ways to solve it: either find a book garden at www.zhaozhuyuan.com or engage in hunger marketing and sell it a few times every few days. Either push the price to a suitable standard. For Hui Yuhao's current situation, the first option is more appropriate. Take more time to understand that the benefits of creation are not harmful to him. Moreover, there is plenty of time now. For a full 5 years, he is completely calm. Time passed quickly, with the rising moon replacing the sunset, and only 3 of Hui Yuhao's grilled fish were sold. Sorry everyone, as today's grilled fish has already been sold out and the remaining 3 are my own meals. I can only wait for the next time if I can't buy them. However, the crowd around me still didn't want to disperse. Can you make an appointment in advance, young brother? Well, first of all, thank you all for your support, but I'm sorry, I can't do anything about it. I can only try to prepare more styles of grilled fish tomorrow. Hui Yuhao spoke these words in a calm tone. I have to play hunger marketing myself, and being too humble in my identity may make me less friendly towards sales. Then he took the cloth bag containing the coins and put the last golden soul coin inside. Looking at the bulging cloth bag, Hui Yuhao showed a satisfied smile. Then he left with the 3 grilled fish for dinner. Hui Yuhao was listening on the street and found a hotel to stay. He didn't dare to leave the city now. Many people are watching my exorbitant grilled fish. Hui Yuhao is not a fool. Now that he is out of the city, there are even 12 cents to be sent, so he decided to rent a hotel to stay on the other side within the starry royal campus. Is it really that delicious? A delicate purple-haired girl dressed in luxurious attire looked at the group of people discussing or grilling fish in the future, muttering to herself. Chapter 5. Princess Su Jiujiu's Attack on the Plane 5KS. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, as the sun rises, a new day begins. Hui Yuhao lazily sat up from the bed and began checking his belongings. Although possessing memories of a past life, he served as a slave in the duchy for 7 years and had little exposure to the outside world. It is natural to be more cautious. Well, there's nothing missing. However, these clothes are a bit. Hui Yuhao looked at his tattered clothes, feeling a bit ashamed. The clothes had already been lost to Hui Yuhao for almost 3 years. What is already tattered is not just clothing. The patches that have been patched more than 10 times are already old and dilapidated, revealing a large area of snow-white skin on the body. The color of the clothes, washed away by time, turns gray and reveals a faint darkness, as if they are discarded fabric like rags. Looking at the clothes, Hui Yuhao seemed to recall the scenes from the past in the Duke's mansion. So I decided to exchange the money I earned yesterday for a new set. The first bucket of gold earned yesterday was very generous for Hui Yuhao, with a total of 43 gold soul coins and 5 silver soul coins. The currency exchange system in this work has been changed, and the original work is too chaotic. 1 gold soul coin is equal to 100 silver soul coins, and 1 silver soul coin is equal to 100 copper coins. Although most of this is actually obtained by selling rare metals if according to normal family standards, it is enough for a normal family to be carefree and spend a few years, but for Hui Yuhao, it is a bit less. But even for ordinary families, in fact, it is better than nothing for soul masters. A normal soul master, even if he is relatively lazy, earns 1 gold soul coin every day, while an ordinary person who works hard all day can barely hold on to 1 or 2 silver soul coins. No way, there are too many things needed, and they are all high-value items. Especially in the Empire of Sun and Moon, the price of storage rings is relatively good, but in the 3 kingdoms of Douluo, the price will double several times. Hui Yuhao has no plans to buy more high-end ones, as long as they can be used to store money. Thinking about the consumption of money by the required items in the future, Hui Yuhao's brain melon seeds are very big. At this moment, Hui Yuhao came up with a crucial item. A recommendation letter. To enter Shrek, you need a recommendation letter at the level of a city lord. Hu Guo can only enter directly without a test through special means of the Tang clan. It is obvious that for Hui Yuhao, this is an impossible solution. He would rather die than get involved with the Tang God King again. Never mind, if it's a big deal, just use mental detection and imitate others' methods. Hui Yuhao comforted himself by saying that the difficulty of this thing was too high, and he really couldn't think of any stable way to obtain it. According to reliable intelligence provided in the original books owned by former Hui Yuhao, it is speculated that the Tang God King was destroyed and strictly guarded after injecting the soul of his daughter's other half into the body of the Emperor's auspicious beast. That is to say, Hui Yuhao either sacrifices the auspicious beast or creates some noise to force him to intervene. Otherwise, he won't be able to move at all now and must act according to the general policy of Tang Xinluo, hoping to moisten the sun and moon. Then I have a way to take my own life. Forget it, I don't want these anymore. Anyway, there are still 5 years left, Hui Yuhao muttered to himself. Then he walked out of the hotel and began to search for the market. It's truly the capital of the Star Luo Empire. It's not even dawn yet, there are so many people, Hui Yuhao couldn't help but sigh, but he wasn't too surprised. No matter how many people there are, it's still a feudal imperial country with low productivity. Sorry, please forgive me a few more days. I will soon raise the money for you. Please, please, don't take my daughter with you. Hui Yuhao turned his head to look at the sound. An old man was holding the leg of a young man and begging him not to take his daughter away, but the young man ignored him and kicked him away, carrying the woman on his shoulder and taking her away. The gloomy old man, on the other hand, was lying on the ground, clutching his stomach and deliberately crawling forward, praying that the other party could return his daughter to him while crawling. Seeing this scene, Hui Yuhao didn't really touch him. In the feudal dynasty, there were too many cases of human trafficking, and besides, the old man still owed him money. Moreover, even if he wants to help, he doesn't have the capital anymore, so he decided to just enjoy it. But he has some curiosity: can such things happen in this capital? Is there no one to care about it? But after thinking about it, I feel it doesn't matter. Anyway, it's not personal and I'm hanging high. Put aside the plot of helping others and respect their fate. He thought so in his mind, but in his heart he didn't feel that he was already accustomed to it, and even experienced it firsthand. But still feeling uncomfortable in my heart, like a rational rebuttal after following the guidance of the signboard, I quickly found the location of the commercial street market. Xinluo City is truly the capital of the Xinluo Empire, with bustling commercial streets and many auction houses on levels 1 to 5. For people like Hui Yuhao who became slaves in the Duke's mansion as soon as they arrived in the world, it was truly like a local dog entering the city and they didn't understand anything. A dazzling array of goods caught the eye, and Hui Yuhao was like a lost lamb, back and forth, searching for places to sell clothing. To be precise, it's not that he got lost. As soon as he looked up, there was still a sign above his head. However, Hui Yuhao wanted to stroll around for a while longer and was not willing to read it anymore. After strolling around for a while, Hui Yuhao felt dizzy. The scale of the commercial street was indeed quite large, and he couldn't even find the location of the clothing store when he was wandering aimlessly, hitting and killing mice. Time flies so fast. Seeing that half of the time had passed, he decided to admit defeat and looked up at the notice board. Following the guidance on the map on the billboard, Hui Yuhao found a relatively large fashion store nearby and walked in. The interior decoration of the store is very luxurious, with a wide variety of clothing and decorations. The service attitude is not very good, and I'm dressed in a poor outfit, so I hardly look good when anyone sees me. In addition, since entering the city, I have hidden my soul power with the power of creation, so my status in the eyes of others is even lower. This has led to Hui Yuhao's current situation being somewhat similar to some of the male protagonists in the novels they have heard, who clearly have strength but deliberately pretend to be garbage. They want those villainous buildings to deliberately mock them and then show their strength and force them. If possible, Hui Yuhao would like to do the same. However, his strength is still too low now, there is no need to cause trouble. If he causes trouble for the Tang God King, it will not be fun. Hui Yuhao didn't pay too much attention to the other person's gaze, he just looked down on them normally, and it wasn't that he didn't refuse to let them in. Ignoring the colored eyes of the waiter, Hui Yuhao started selecting clothes on his own. White doesn't work, it's too easy to get dirty. Well, red doesn't work either, it's too bright and not conducive to sudden situations and hiding oneself. Black, it's a bit like an evil soul master. Hui Yuhao selected it in the store, but each one seems to have some minor flaws. This made Hui Yuhao's fear of choice difficult. Never mind, like an evil soul master, just like an evil soul master. In the end, I chose the old set I liked in my past life. The black suit. Sir, are you going to choose this set? The total value is 16 soul coins. If you don't have enough funds, you can choose to buy it next time. Watching Hui Yuhao choose this set of clothes, the nearby waiter quickly explained to him, afraid that the beggar in front of him couldn't afford to pay. Hui Yuhao was also quite angry in his heart. As Hui Yuhao watched him use respectful language towards the person who had just entered, he turned to himself, but his tone became more harsh. Immediately, Hui Yuhao walked towards the counter carrying two identical sets. During his journey, his anger also dissipated by half. As a poor loser, it was already impossible for him not to be ridiculed by others. The other party's words just now can only be considered a reminder that the other party has already fulfilled their duty without rejecting them. Respecting high-level individuals is also one of the characteristics of feudalism, which can be said to be tasted. It is not advisable to hastily blame others for saving. Otherwise, it would be similar to the protagonist character template of Tang Shenhuang. Thinking about the young man who slaughtered the dragon, Hui Yuhao couldn't help but shiver in his heart. He didn't want to do this. Will you start feeling a bit complacent after gaining power? It seems that I also need to hone my mood well. At the counter, he patted 32 gold soul coins onto the table and turned around before leaving. Hui Yuhao felt a hint of shame in his heart at this moment, hastily throwing down the money and leaving. However, even without this incident, it is highly likely that Hui Yuhao would still be like this. Buyers who buy clothes themselves and merchants who sell clothes together don't have much to say. They are all clearly priced goods, and after payment, it becomes clear. What else is there to say? Is it difficult for me to bring you along because you sold me clothes? Because if you buy me, you have to be worshipped as God. It's just a clearly priced business. Unless you want to establish a good relationship with the other party, after all, there is nothing to show attention to, either cheating or stealing. More importantly, for Hui Yuhao, even if he makes good friends, there is not much value in the later stage, and it is best to do less of this useless work. People cannot be too utilitarian, but they cannot be completely utilitarian. Just maintain a certain degree, things will turn around when they reach the extreme. Ah, my strength is really not enough. If it's enough, I don't even need to buy clothes. Just pinch one myself. Leaving the clothing area of the commercial street, Hui Yuhao wandered around to the food and other areas, purchased some seasonings for cooking, and then prepared to return home. Kid, stop me. Hui Yuhao was quick-witted and said, "You're not calling me, are you?" He quickly turned his head to check. Without waiting for Hui Yuhao to turn around and check, he was pushed down by two strong men. "Is that your kid who sold fish yesterday?" said one strong man. Hui Yuhao, on the other hand, turned over and nodded slightly as he looked at them. He thought to himself, "That's it, Miao. It's my turn to be charged protection fees this time. Don't you know that's the territory of our Zhao gang, kid? How dare you use it secretly?" Another strong man stared at Hui Yuhao with fierce eyes and said, his fists just prepared for a ready attack, beating Hui Yuhao up at any time. "I'm sorry, uncle. I didn't know on my first day. You should be paying for protection, right? I'll give it to you." Hui Yuhao replied with a humble tone, but his heart was not like this. The one on the left should be a beast soul, around level 23, the one on the right should be a weapon soul, around level 36. Level 10 is better than 2 levels 20.30, so it's not a big problem for me. Although it was not difficult for Hui Yuhao to escape from their hands, he had to stay here for 5 years. Losing money and avoiding disasters was not a bad thing for Hui Yuhao. Moreover, I don't need to repeatedly avoid disasters. Based on the current situation nearby, these two people only dare to blackmail me in areas with fewer people. As long as I don't mess with each other, I probably won't make a scene of robbery like I saw when I came. Xinluo City is the capital of the Xinluo Empire. If it were placed in some places with normal human traffic, they would not dare to make such a mistake. Hui Yuhao didn't speak, but waited for the two of them to first reveal the price, weigh the pros and cons, and then take the next action. After all, he wasn't the one to blame, it was too much, and he couldn't bear it. "Give us all the money you earned last time, and we'll teach you a lesson at that time," said one of the strong men, with a sly smile on his face. Damn it, did this blow my money like a strong wind? Hui Yuhao cursed inwardly, but dared not express himself, and his plan to escape had already begun. This is the result of one's own labor, why give it to them? If it's a big deal, change your head and continue working on a different side. Hui Yuhao has already been infuriated. The other party's exorbitant demands have made him feel annoyed. Of course, this is not the most important thing, but more importantly, he has just spent a lot of money and can no longer afford it. Hui Yuhao could guess with his toes that this situation would be a cliché signature, debt repayment, and high-interest loan. Finally, there was the snowball rolling, sharp and rolling, becoming more and more like the scene of the person I saw in the morning. Seeing that Hui Yuhao did not react, the two big men prepared to give this newly entered blue-haired boy a lesson. One of the strong men has raised his hand and is preparing to give a slight attack on Hui Yuhao. "Hey, what are you two doing?" A female voice suddenly sounded behind the two strong men. The two strong men, however, appeared particularly frightened and cursed softly, "You're really lucky, kid." Then he turned to compliment the origin of the voice together. "This is a misunderstanding, Royal Highness Princess, we just happened to pass by, accidentally bumped into him, and I'm still reaching out to help him." The voice was very humble, for fear of causing the other party upset. Upon hearing this, Hui Yuhao was very happy. It was easy to understand that the princess they were referring to was Su Jiujiu, the only sister of Emperor Xinluo Su Jiuwei. He couldn't help but marvel at the fortunate fate of the son of fate, who had just encountered Su Jiujiu, who had come down to brush people's favor. "Are you two treating this princess like a fool? And you have such big fists, are you called a jerk?" After seeing them for a long time wanting to argue, it was true that you were a bit angry. And the person behind him also understood this situation and stepped forward to crush the two to the ground. Hui Yuhao, lying on the ground, was momentarily stunned and extremely embarrassed. He could only remain motionless and pretend to be shocked by what was in front of him. The guards behind Su Jiujiu quickly rushed out, pulling apart the two people who were pressing down on Hui Yuhao and pinning their backs to the ground. As the two robbers were pulled apart, a gentle and elegant fragrance that belonged only to the innocent girl drifted towards Hui Yuhao. In the next lesson, a slender figure wearing a deep purple strong suit was seen after the meeting. Wearing a dazzling and bright golden hairpin, with a luxurious and smooth purple hair that contrasts with a pure and white jade neck like swan wings, a faint smile hangs on the magnificent and stunning face, making one feel a wave of palpitations and surging emotions. Watching Hui Yuhao still standing up, Su Jiujiu walked straight to him and reached out his hand, saying, "Hello. I'm Su Jiujiu, Princess Xinluo. You just came to Xinluo City, right?" The scene at this moment made Hui Yuhao feel embarrassed. Good guy, isn't this the standard prince saving Cinderella? How did the gender change? It all adds up to me becoming Cinderella, right? Hui Yuhao thought to himself. However, in order to maintain the character image of the newly arrived Maotu boy, Hui Yuhao expressed a flustered expression and said, "Sorry, Royal Highness Princess, I didn't know it was you." Then he raised his hand to get up, and did not take over the hand for a long time. This action clearly left Su Jiujiu unsatisfied. I saw him continue to extend his outstretched hand forward, grabbing Hui Yuhao's hand and pulling it up. The comedic thing happened when Hui Yuhao stumbled like he was suddenly tripped by some external force and fell into his arms for a long time. The two of them kissed each other mouth to mouth. Douluo Plain. He 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 he. At this moment, both of them were blinded, and the two young boys and girls blushed and kissed each other, their bodies pressed against each other. The scene was suddenly very quiet. Due to the fact that it was summer, the clothes worn by Su Jiujiu were relatively thin, and Hui Yuhao could almost fully feel the tactile sensation emanating from the other person's soft and sticky body. A strong body fragrance that only belonged to a young girl. With the introduction of Momo, Hui Yuhao's nose and chest were already slightly shaped, pressed by Hui Yuhao. Su Jiujiu's face was flushed and she wanted to immediately push the person in front of her away, but it was unclear whether it was due to noble upbringing or some special reasons. She didn't have that much and thought it was too urgent. I had to stretch out my hands and place them on Hui Yuhao's shoulder, slowly moving him away from me. At this moment, Hui Yuhao also recovered from his dazed state and quickly apologized to Su Jiujiu in front of him, "I'm sorry, it wasn't intentional." His heart was also in a state of panic. Su Jiujiu was able to meet him, and coming here did not surprise him. As a member of the royal family, one must have some goodwill in front of the public. But this situation is completely beyond expectations, and it can even be said that it is impossible to anticipate. Hu Yuhao only has one option to apologize for this. If he angers her, his next actions will be in vain. At this moment, the situation of the two strong men's guard brothers was pressing down, and they didn't care about the person in their hands. They quickly rushed forward to suppress Hu Yuhao and became concerned about the situation for a long time. Hidden in the dark, the long-standing guardian Xinyin Douluo was also in a state of panic, but the danger of not taking action was not up to him. But those two strong men did not flee quickly. After all, what's the use of fleeing to Shuyuan? www.zhaoshuyuan.com. He is the princess of the entire Star Empire. No matter how hard you try to escape, how can you escape? Moreover, this is not a major crime in itself, it can be done by paying a little money. On the contrary, Hu Yuhao made them very excited. You stinky boy, you should be punished for offending your Royal Highness Princess. How can you live? That's right, the other person quickly agreed. This has left Hu Yuhao feeling helpless. Originally, someone could have come to save the scene, so there was no need to self-destruct. He was quite happy, but who could have thought that this incident would happen again? At this moment, her fair face, as white as winter snow for a long time, was still covered in a thick blush, until the soldier next to her reported. Your Highness, Royal Highness Princess, how should we deal with this young man who has offended you? Of course, he also hid his mind and did not say that he was not able to protect the princess. I think we should kill this kid on the spot, agreed another soldier, who was holding down Hu Yuhao. At this moment, Su Jiujiu had just regained his composure and said, Don't do this, he's right, it's just that I accidentally pulled too hard, and I still have something to talk to him about. His face turned red and he suppressed his shyness, speaking rationally. For her, the only male contact she has had since childhood is her brother Su Jiuwei, and today her first kiss was suddenly taken away by a stranger. The shame and panic in her heart are inevitable. Divinity in a castle emitting a sacred aura, a white void sphere is floating in the prison inside the castle, watching everything happen. Well, it seems I'm doing pretty well, Xiao Yuheo. I'm lucky this time. However, there is still room for operation, it seems that I need to increase my efforts. Chapter 6. White Princess 4KS. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, but Royal Highness Princess took your. At this moment, the guards holding down Hu Yuhao heard the princess's words and wanted to emphasize the crime committed by Hu Yuhao to the princess. However, considering the princess's face, they promptly retracted those two words. The difference in identity between Hu Yuhao and Su Jiujiu is not insignificant. The story of Cinderella and Prince Charming is unlikely to be believed by the ruling class at all, let alone their opposite genders. When Cinderella is most likely caught in a fairy tale and brought into reality, he is destined to be unable to escape, whether voluntarily or not. The hereditary system of feudal empires destined everyone's class to be determined from birth, and unless encountering some unexpected opportunities, even if they were exhausted for a lifetime, they would not be able to change it. Status is like AIDS, which is transmitted through mother and child, blood and sex. This is the case in the original world he lives in, and also in this Douluo society. They are all social framework structures and ideologies built on a human basis, and even with the addition of mystical elements, their essence remains unchanged. Su Jiujiu on the side did not pay attention to what the guard said. This is a commercial street nearby. The pedestrian flow is very huge, even on this relatively remote road section, there are still many people passing by. Moreover, there was a great commotion here just now, which has attracted many onlookers. In just this short while, the onlookers gathered one after another, and if we don't leave, it will be well known throughout the city. When Su Jiujiu thought about what had just happened between him and the young man, his rosy face became even more dizzy, with a few shades of color added. She bit her teeth lightly and said with a blush on her face, "This palace has said that it's not his fault." "You take him back to the palace," Su Jiujiu said, suppressing his shame and rushing away from the crowd towards the palace. And the guard on the side received the latest order, naturally no longer caring about the previous two strong men, quickly escorted by Su Jiu's side and returned to the palace. One of the guards used extremely violent means to grab Huiyuhao, who was still in a daze, and carried him on his shoulder. He quickly followed the large army towards the direction where Su Jiujiu had been. Dong! At this moment, Huiyuhao had arrived in the palace and was left in a guest room by the guards carrying him on the shoulders of the nano. Ah! Can't we just be a little lighter? He rubbed his once dull head that had been bitten and complained on the other side. Upon returning, Su Jiujiu pushed open his room door and threw himself onto his bed, covering his head with a blanket and wrapping it in a ball. Ah, he shouted, his face flushed like a ripe, red apple. He recalled the side on the commercial street and unconsciously said, "In front of so many people." Thinking of doing it, I once again remembered the physical contact with that young man. The sense of shyness in my heart reached its peak again, and my hand squeezed the quilt harder, completely wrapped myself into a zongzi and rolled on the bed. And the chief attendant at the door, relying solely on the information given to him by the second guards and what Su Jiujiu has done now, analyzed her emotions at this moment and decided to report to her superiors. Compared to the shameful Su Jiujiu, Huiyuhao, who was left in the guest room at this moment, seemed quite relaxed. Anyway, Huiyuhao is a man. Although he cares about this matter, if there is an accident, he will disappear without taking the initiative. Quickly walked out of that awkward scene. Although I feel very unhappy that my first kiss was inexplicably taken away, I can't say anything due to the other person's identity. Just thinking back on that peculiar feeling, Huiyuhao had a strange idea that seemed quite good, and shook his head to dispel the sudden delusion. Now he is relying on the wall to close his eyes and practice, looking quite leisurely. The power of life and death is in the hands of others, and one cannot change anything they do. Their tone is so panicked that it's better to wait and see what happens. Besides, even if something happens, it won't have a significant impact on Huiyuhao, just run away like the one in the Duke's mansion. It's not a big deal to change your face and find a new place to make money, but compared to Xinluo City, you may earn slightly less. Huiyuhao is still very frugal in using his creation power. After all, it takes a whole night to fully recover. The previous consumption in the Duke's mansion was quite considerable, so try not to use it as much as possible. Anyway, it is necessary to leave a certain amount of reserves to cope with unexpected events such as the Tang God King. But speaking of which, it seems that Su Jiujiu still said he wanted to talk to me about something. Huiyuhao suddenly recalled what Su Jiujiu had said before. It's impossible to find out that I'm the one who escaped from the White Tiger Duke's house, right? Huiyuhao thought to himself, but this possibility is almost zero. Even the Divine King couldn't find him, let alone a small soul emperor. If you really want to find it, you can only rely on blood ties, but I have not heard of many methods that are relatively easy to detect on a large scale in the future. It's impossible to give the entire Star City a blood test, right? In terms of appearance, Huiyuhao is very confident that he will not be discovered, otherwise he would have suffered the crime of peeling in vain. Is it difficult again, grilled fish? Huiyuhao felt that this possibility was the greatest. After contacting Su Jiujiu about the direction he went when he first met him and what he said to him, it is highly likely that this is the case. It's not a small incident where one's own roasted fish, worth 1 gold soul coin, has caused trouble in Xinluo City. From the very little information revealed in the original work, Su Jiujiu's personality occasionally travels around to brush up on the public's favorability. It's quite normal to hear about the grilled fish that has already received a gold soul coin. Huo Guo, who is always insincere, also mentioned that he could try to take a walk through this line, but Hui Yuhao had already rejected him on the spot. His way of handling emotions may not be even more rubbish than Hui Yuhao, a steel-straight man. Listening to Hu Guo's advice in this regard has no significant reference value. Most of them are being pursued backwards, and he can't learn his innocent personality either. After thinking about this idea, he realized that it was not very easy to handle. His original idea was to make money safely and steadily, while also studying the basic rules of the world. It is obvious that if it is really because of my grilled fish, I will definitely be recruited to work as a specialized chef. When the time comes, you can't help but do what you want, let alone have 2 of your own revenge targets in the palace. This is an existing issue. And now there is another long-standing conflict with Su Jiujiu, and the other party's favorability towards him should plummet. Even if he enters, the treatment may be worse than in the Duke's mansion. It's impossible for this matter to continue to rise, right? Absolutely impossible. It seems like we can only escape. Hui Yuhao murmured with some reluctance. Suddenly, Hui Yuhao noticed someone wandering around the door, their voice occasionally touching the door frame and trying to push it in, but when it touched, it retracted. Su Jiujiu. Hui Yuhao roughly guessed who the visitor was. Well, this really has a significant impact on her. Although Hui Yuhao can also be considered a straight man, he is not a wooden person. Looking at Su Jiujiu, who had been twisting and swaying outside the door one after another, wanting to enter but not daring to enter, naturally understood the emotions contained in it. Watching this scene, Hui Yuhao felt somewhat relieved. It is obvious from this action that Su Jiujiu did not have too much evil intentions towards himself. As for whether he blamed himself or not, he doesn't know how to evaluate it. Thinking of this, Hui Yuhao couldn't help but feel a new fondness for this princess whom he didn't know very well. If such a thing happens, it's impossible to still want to become a cook. It's highly likely that you'll have to lower some penalties for yourself. Xinluo city is much better than the capitals of other 2 countries, and the money is also easier. If he really changes places, Hui Yuhao is really reluctant to part with it. Then let's get punished first. As long as it's not the death penalty, anyone else can accept it. Being imprisoned is enough, just create a dead clone and run away on your own. Hui Yuhao thought to himself, although it was too humble and even immoral. But this is currently the best method. Hui Yuhao pretended to recover from his fear and put on a harmless expression. My current identity is nothing more than a few-year-old child. If I behave too maturely and steadily, it may attract unnecessary attention. Although there is a reason to explain this phenomenon, it is well known that children on the Douluo continent are usually extremely precocious, but of course, this precocity often has almost no effect on mental precocity. Even at the age of 14, it can be considered, and if I simplify my experience a bit, it can also be considered a bit tragic. If I were to contact that person in the divine realm, Hui Yuhao himself doesn't seem to care much. He cares more about mental torment, while physical torment feels harmless. He still has a certain understanding of this world. Even if he lives poorly, he is better than those who work hard day and night at the bottom, like a screw, and can still be used to install it on the big machine of society. Once it is damaged, it can be dismantled and thrown away, resulting in a tragic ending. His spirit is at least free and will not be eroded or struck by a large amount of democracy. Under normal circumstances, they will not be demoted by capital, and those who are demoted are not even as good as dogs. No matter how unpleasant his life is, he can at least find a calmer place to retire. Click. As the door was pushed open, Hui Yuhao temporarily put an end to the swirling thoughts in his mind, pretending to be shy and surprised as he watched Su Jiujiu push the door in front of him. Inadvertently, their eyes met again, and Su Jiujiu's originally rosy cheeks turned red and rosy. So, what's your name? He suppressed the sense of shyness in his heart and finally hesitated to utter these words, but due to his shyness, he never uttered the last word. Hui Yuhao looked at his shy expression and felt a little helpless. My humble name is Huiyuhao. As soon as he finished speaking, Huiyuhao collapsed on the ground and knelt down, speaking with an extremely humble attitude. The other party's identity, but the princess herself is not too afraid to offend, and there is no description of this age group in the original text for a long time. There is no such thing as a set of settings, and many of them are different from what I read in my original book. Thinking of this, Huiyuhao really wants to go back and give Zhang 2 punches. If he had written in more detail, Huiyuhao wouldn't have wasted so much precious time listening to the basic knowledge of Genesis popularization. But Huiyuhao's operation left Su Jiujiu confused. They, the Star Crown clan, have been governing the country since the evil-eyed White Tiger clan personally abdicated the throne. They have always been diligent and conscientious, and have basically not used the usual methods of the ruling class to manipulate the authority and divine authority of the emperor like in the previous life of Huiyuhao. Even though most incumbent individuals lack foresight and have not had a significant impact on the development of the country, they can still manage the country with diligence. But Huiyuhao was not clear about these. He subconsciously inserted the Douluo star into his own set of feudal theories, although most of them were indeed as he thought, there were still quite a few surprises. But it's not his fault either. His second life experience made him disgusted with the rule of feudal officials and capital. The kind of trap that has already made it mesmerized, once it involves feudalism, and automatically brings it to mind. Moreover, it is extremely difficult to see a royal family like your Star Luo Empire that strictly considers the lower class. Who can be confident that this next generation will definitely be as outstanding as the previous generation? Hey, no, you don't have to be like this. You know who I am, right? Su Jiujiu said in a flustered and panicked tone, even with a hint of crying in his voice when he saw Huiyuhao's expression. Huiyuhao did not take advantage of the situation, but instead slammed his head heavily onto the ground, making the necessary sound of a heavy blow. I'm sorry, Your Highness is the fault of the humble people, Huiyuhao continued in the same tone. Ah, it hurts. Huiyuhao groaned helplessly in his heart, regretting why he kowtowed so hard, but he dared not get up, afraid of angering the feudal aristocrat in his eyes. Looking at the young man in front of him, he fiercely knocked on himself for a long time, his mind even more flustered, his mind blank, and his actions without thinking, so he stepped forward to pull him up. But under the fear, shame, and other emotions of missing out, he did not realize that his cultivation surpassed this young man by a lot. The soul power on the body is also unconsciously mobilized, and in an unconscious state, it has not restrained its violent energy. In addition, the power released by the mobilization of soul power has increased significantly, just pulling up the young man, to be more precise, it is pulling up. But for some reason, the ground became extremely smooth, as if losing friction. After a long time, the body lost balance and pressed against Huiyuhao's body. Douluo Plain. Hi, I'm here again. Pop it. Their bodies were once again pressed against each other, and when both sides regained their senses, they were gazing at each other in this way. The eyes of both sides met, and at the same time, the red light rime climbed onto the faces of 2 blue young girls at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan. Calm. Looking at the bowl of white egret-like and pure girl pressing on her body, who was otherwise worldly dust and sand, even Huiyuhao, who was not close to women, couldn't help but start to daydream. It smells so good, so soft. No, what the hell am I thinking? Ah. Without playing like this, even the son of Qi Yun doesn't bring such a free gift. Huiyuhao shouted in his heart as he looked at the long and somewhat collapsed pressure on himself. When Huiyuhao traveled, he was nothing more than a teenager in his early 20s who had never experienced such a thing before, and his soul still belonged to the category of immaturity and purity. He just wants to quickly find a reason to sneak out and then go back to his broken cave to become a mountaintop cave person studying world rules. Did you end up doing this for yourself? A princess girl for free. Huiyuhao really wanted to push Su Jiujiu away quickly, but how could his level 10 soul warrior be moved? What about a level 20 soul master? Although Huiyuhao struggled very hard, it was still ineffective. Su Jiujiu had already given up thinking in the face of such a situation, allowing his sense of shame to occupy his brain. Su Jiujiu pressed Huiyuhao in a strange posture, and pressed his forehead close to the young man in front of him, watching his shy expression and slightly red cheeks highlight the beautiful and dazzling starry sky-colored pupils of everyone. "It's so beautiful," the brain instinctively and subconsciously blurts out. "For a long time, you are." At this moment, a sentence suddenly came from the door, and the two of them looked towards the door from the silence. A tall and handsome young man in a yellow robe was standing there watching them. Seeing the appearance of the newcomer, Huiyuhao was even more devastated. This time, even if he jumped into the Yellow River, he couldn't wash himself. Chapter 7. The main idea does not flash 5K. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. The events happening in the solemn and elegant palace are not very elegant. A noble and elegant woman with beautiful purple hair is pressing down on a petite and inexperienced blue-haired young man, Xing Taishao Nanyang, Big Mist. At the door stood a young man with black hair, who stood straight there witnessing the scene. The arrival of Su Jiuwei made Huiyuhao even more at a loss. It's quite normal for him to come and visit his sister, but the scene he came here was a bit coincidental, and he happened to be in this scene. Seeing Su Jiujiu's brother coming for a long time made him even more flustered. The already embarrassing incident became even worse again, but fortunately, his mind cleared up a bit. "Brother, it's not what you saw," he said and quickly got up. But looking back at Huiyuhao lying on the ground, she felt ashamed and said, "Ah, why on earth? Why is today so unlucky?" The shy girl kept shouting in her heart, but dared not show her face. In Su Jiujiu's eyes, not only did he feel ashamed to snatch the first kiss from the young man in front of him, but he also came for a second time in front of his most respected brother. Make extremely intimate gestures with this young man. Su Jiujiu is now almost like a walking kettle, constantly emitting steam. Abbreviated as Steam G. He naturally knows that his brother's character spoils him the most. If he were to know, he would definitely find it difficult for this innocent young man for his own face. I was anxious to explain to my brother, but before I could speak, I was interrupted by his sharp voice. "No need, I'm probably clear about it." Su Jiuwei saw his sister's nervous expression, and coupled with his own explanation of the demonstration, he roughly understood that the scene before him was just a coincidence. But even so, he could not help roast. This blue-haired boy is really lucky. He has eaten tofu twice for a long time, but he is not active. He felt a bit discouraged when he thought of this. His cabbage was eaten by a pig, who wouldn't be angry. I took the initiative to release my mental pressure and wanted to explore the bottom of this kid. It's not affected. No. I can't even detect his martial soul origin, not even his soul power. Su Jiuwei was greatly shocked in his heart. As a level 78, soul saint, he couldn't detect the opponent, let alone explore, and even couldn't see their existence. This result is true and gives Su Jiuwei a head start. Immediately, the sixth soul ring lit up. A golden three-pointed crown shimmering with colorful stars appeared on Su Jiuwei's head in an instant. The most unique soul skill of the Star Crown Pulse is also activated. The Star Rope Elephant. You can ignore all means such as Soul Master level and instant soul guides to observe the opponent's current physical condition, as well as detailed information about the martial soul and the most important soul source. They once became the most reliable intelligence traffickers on the mainland with this skill. Although their efficiency was not high, it was also the fundamental reason why their Star Crown clan could survive for thousands of years to start. At present, the best books related to soul masters and martial souls are also written by the Star Crown sect, which belongs to the Star Crown clan. But when he released his gaze towards Huiyuhao, a vast and magnificent gaze resembling the vast Milky Way suddenly appeared in his mind, and the vast expanse of endless starry sky reflected by his back. Compared to the guy who rushed in, Su Jiuwei's individual appeared so small and insignificant. Time seemed to have come to a standstill in an instant, and after some time, the other party seemed somewhat unhappy. A terrifying force of rules bounced him back and intimidated Su Jiuwei's spiritual sea. Su Jiuwei had already started to unconsciously ooze blood due to a strange accident. His spiritual sea was once the most serious trauma of his life, and although he did not have any life-threatening plantar warts, it was impossible for this injury to heal without rest for a year and a half. He could clearly feel that the vast and dazzling eyes, like the sea and the Milky Way, were just a slight hint of dissatisfaction, causing him serious injuries, and he had already done his best. This made Su Jiuwei realize that the other party did not lack the power to kill him with a single blow, it was just because he did not want to do so. This sun is so terrifying, it seems that this time has not been at a disadvantage. It would be a good memory if I could use this to bring him into my camp. Moreover, Jiujiu doesn't have any aversion towards him. Su Jiuwei's face showed a pale expression, gasping for breath, but his brain did not stop for a moment and was still running at full speed. He is also worthy of being the current emperor. Even though his mental health has been severely impacted, his thinking is still quite jumping. He quickly recovered from the shock and inferred his innate terror from the spider silk and horse feet displayed by Huiyuhao. Take no responsibility for the harm you have suffered. Any casual defense from the origin of the martial soul cannot even be considered defense, triggering a rule-level backlash. What is his original existence and how advanced is it? Even if it is a divine-level martial soul bestowed by a god, it is unlikely to receive such treatment. Immediately, Su Jiuwei quickly turned his profile and pretended to be unable to look straight out of the room. In fact, he had to tidy up his face outside the door. For a moment, his pale face showed a benevolent smile as he walked into the room and walked towards Huiyuhao, reaching out his hand to pull himself up. Don't be afraid, child. I am Emperor Xinluo Su Jiuwei. I have something to talk to you about. Huiyuhao naturally caught the change in Su Jiuwei's expression at that moment, but he racked his brains and couldn't come up with a reason. At first, the other party's face was filled with shock and finally anger, but suddenly, as if stimulated by something, they walked out and came back with a slightly pale face, showing a kind smile. Huiyuhao could sense this series of expressions, but it was impossible to understand what had happened. After all, he was not a god and could not have anticipated everything. Faced with the helping hand extended by the ruler of this country, he had to accept it again. The child comes with me. As soon as Huiyuhao got up, he said this sentence and immediately turned around without looking back. Huiyuhao could only keep up. Following the other person's footsteps, Huiyuhao's heart was thinking of others. What can Su Jiuwei talk to me about? There are 8 or 9 out of 10 things to send. He thought this way, and the manual power of creation had already begun to be squeezed, ready to run away at any time. Seeing this situation, Su Jiujiu believed that his brother was afraid that he would not be able to be ruthless and that he would be at a disadvantage. He wanted to lynch the young man and personally take action. He quickly wanted to keep up, but was stopped by Su Jiuwei long beam stone steps, willow tree pavilion. As Huiyuhao followed Su Jiuwei deeper, the scenery in the palace gradually appeared in front of Huiyuhao. Although these were somewhat shocking to Huiyuhao, he dared not plan to stay any longer. We had to keep up with Su Jiuwei's pace and move forward. After a long time, Su Jiuwei brought Huiyuhao to a pavilion located in the middle of the He Lake. Passing by were waiters who came to deliver pastries and cut tea. Without exception, they all revealed surprise and doubt. Although Huiyuhao had already purchased intact clothes, he was caught too early and brought here before he could change them. I am still wearing the same set of clothing that I have been wearing for 3 years, which comes from the Duke's mansion and is unknown whether it is called a waterfall or a garment. A large number of patches and holes intersect to paint the faded fabric, which appears somewhat gray-white with the pudding. However, the sweat and sewage on top dye it black again. Surprisingly, there is no unique odor of sweat, and the smell on the clothes is only a faint mud smell. You can also find a seat to sit down. This is not Shangqiao. You can also call me Su Jiawei by your name, or if you still can't adapt, call me Uncle Su. Don't worry too much. Su Jiawei's calm and even somewhat intimate words. Directly smoking on Hui Yuhao's brain shell, I completely can't guess his thoughts. I had to listen to his words and find a distance. He had 1 or 2 empty seats to sit down in, which was a good angle, at least not enough to look directly at him when he looked up. But even if he showed kindness and closeness, he still couldn't conceal the aura emanating from the eyes of the ruler of his country. This aura was not power, but it was stronger than power. He clearly understood that this was not something that someone as young as him in 2 lifetimes combined could grasp. He could only sit there, his eyes tense and swaying, restless and waiting quietly for Su Jiawei to speak. The only thing we can do is to carefully detect suspicious people around us, maintain a high level of vigilance, and be prepared to flee at any time regardless of anything. But what made Hui Yuhao feel a little uneasy after observation was that there were at least 5 super Douluo around him. He cursed inwardly, this guy probably values himself a bit too much. The other party seemed to sense Hui Yuhao's nervousness and said, "Don't be so nervous. I really don't have any malicious intentions, and I won't blame you after all, it was just an accident. After meeting for so long, I still don't know your name." Su Jiawei came up to appease and then asked Hui Yuhao for his name in an irresistible language art. There is nothing to hide from Hui Yuhao in this regard, at least based on his current performance towards himself, it is not harmful to him. It is also harmless to report his real name first. By the way, you can also blow up the bottom line of the White Tiger Duke's mansion's search efforts against yourself. The Duke of White Tiger's mansion can also be considered a major figure among the aristocrats of Star Luo. As long as there is a slight amount of intelligence about the other party, the royal family cannot ignore the investigation. Hui Yuhao. Upon hearing this name, Su Jiawei's eyebrows furrowed slightly, but soon they relaxed and his expression seemed to become even more cheerful. "What are you doing in Xinluo City?" "My home is in a small village near the Mingdo forest, but I was suddenly attacked by an evil soul master. I was the only one who escaped from the village and had to come to Xinluo City to survive." Evil soul master. Recently, several border villages have indeed been attacked by evil soul masters, and Sun and Moon have had close ties to the Holy Spirit Church in recent years. It is indeed possible that they did it. Su Jiawei muttered to himself, speaking in a low voice with a force that Hui Yuhao could also hear, as if he was intentionally trying to tell him. But in his heart, he completely distrusts Hui Yuhao's statement. Hui Yuhao is still a foolish person. In the first sentence of communication, the other party had already fully understood the details but was completely unaware. I just had some doubts about why the other person's way of talking to themselves was so strange, and I didn't expect that the other person was completely helping me smooth things out. "What is your martial soul?" Hui Yuhao was a bit confused. How did he know I was a soul master? Wait for me to disguise myself. Hui Yuhao was busy preparing to squeeze his creative power and escape, forgetting that he had completely disguised himself and only concealed himself, making it impossible for anyone to see him clearly. And the level of suspicion generated by this is even higher. If others can see through you at a glance, they will naturally feel at ease, because this means that you are not as strong as their own, but people often have doubts and vigilance about unknown things. But even the extreme semi-divine level of Hui Yuhao cannot detect his cultivation, which will only make people even more frightened. Hui Yuhao was very helpless and had no choice but to truthfully explain, the spirit is a mutated martial soul with spiritual eyes. Ontology martial soul. Su Jiawei was somewhat shocked and revealed on his face, but it didn't last long before he regained his composure. "Yes, Your Majesty. Why don't you go to the ontology sect when you have innate martial soul and innate full soul power? According to reason, if you have such a talent, you will receive good treatment when you go to the ontology sect, let alone they already protect the calf. Su Jiuwei threw out his doubts with a hint of anticipation in his words. He longed to extract more information from the mouth of the child in front of him. He naturally did not directly ask the opponent about the origin of the martial soul, the essence of the martial soul, and the origin of the martial soul. If he wanted to figure it out too difficult, this child seemed to be at an average age. It would be strange if he could figure it out on his own. But what cannot be ignored is the strength of his soul's origin. Upon hearing Su Jiuwei's doubts, Hui Yuhao immediately recited the reason he had already prepared. To be honest, Your Majesty, I have another brother who is in Shrek. My mother asked me to find him before she died. Hui Yuhao pretended to be pitiful. Of course there is, it is indeed true. I do have an older brother in Shrek, but my purpose in finding him is at this point. Su Jiuwei let out a slight sigh and touched his chin with his hand, making a look of contemplation. Upon hearing this answer, he once again linked Hui Yuhao with Duke Baihu, who was a lost illegitimate child, and realized that removing some information from Hui Yuhao's language would enable complete verification. A faint smile couldn't help but appear on his face. He had a 99% certainty about the other person's identity, especially after knowing their true identity, which made him even more ecstatic. Upon seeing this, Hui Yuhao finally breathed a sigh of relief. It's really meowing. If I hadn't thought of a reason in advance, he might not have sent me to the ontology sect. If Hui Yuhao remembers correctly, the character relationship mentioned in the book was that Su Jiujiu married a young man from the ontology sect. Just like Vina from the Heavenly Soul Empire, she became an undead and even wanted to raise a tiger with her own body as soon as she lost her fiancé, using herself and Huguo to fight for higher benefits for her empire. For this, the composition of Hui Yuhao is extremely complex and difficult to evaluate. The controversial question of Wei's different positions, the order of his interests, and the various aspects that can be explained are also different. This means that he does not have a legitimate answer and can only list several possible perspectives presented by his positions for analysis. As for whether the other party wants to win him over, Hui Yuhao never thought about it. There are too few introductions in the book, and the human form has not mentioned this person to him. Hui Yuhao still had a preconceived view that he did not lack talent. After all, he was the ruler of a country. The ontology sect is indeed a good choice for Hui Yuhao, but it is ultimately the study of soul guides by the middle gate, which can be said to be pitiful. In addition, the divine king in the sky is constantly trying to find a way to keep an eye on himself. Finding a foothold among the three great empires is ultimately not good. Hui Yuhao just didn't imitate this time. What about next time? Only by accelerating the plan to capture the handle of Tang Monk King's destruction can one move more freely. Thinking of this, Hui Yuhao silently drafted another set of Plan B in his heart. Commonly known as having multiple plans, planning is smooth. As long as there are enough plans and enough secrets, then my plans can be smooth. Find Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, and finally I can become the cardholder of the new world. So if there's a proposal, I wonder if you'll accept it or not. Su Jiuwei suddenly spoke up. Your Majesty, you said, Hui Yuhao replied, not as tactful as before, but full of perseverance. It seems like telling the emperor in front of him that he must go to Shrek. Su Jiuwei naturally also noticed that Hui Yuhao's little Jiujiu had already been taken out by the other party, and this kind of caution was inevitable. He doesn't have much opinion on where to go, but the only requirement is to tie up their pirate ship in advance in the future. Su Jiuwei grinned and said, you should be aware that going to Shrek requires a city lord level recommendation letter. You probably don't have many stable ways to get it, do you? It's okay, I can. I can even give you stable funds, but you have to agree to some conditions. Your Majesty, what are the specific conditions? Hui Yuhao did not immediately agree. After all, he was still the emperor of a country and could not do such a meaningless thing. I also know what happened between you and Jiujiu. As a man, if you take away the other person's first attempt, you will be responsible. Although you may not have intended it, he is my life, and I will definitely lean towards her first, Su Jiuwei said seriously. But this sentence is just a superficial reason on his lips. Hui Yuhao was naturally not cerebral palsy. He could understand that Su Jiuwei's intention in his words was to tie himself up with his pirate ship, but he still couldn't believe it. In order to obtain more information, Hui Yuhao chose to ask knowingly and make his words clearer. Hui Yuhao pretended to be ignorant and trembled as he asked, "Your Majesty, what does this mean?" Chapter 8. Marriage forced to board a ship 5ks. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, I want you to be engaged to Jiujiu. Although Hui Yuhao already understood the meaning he was expressing in his heart, he was still surprised. What kind of ghost? The emperor has cerebral palsy, right? Even if it's the son of fate, I wonder if you're not clear, right? It's impossible for me to label this title as the son of luck on my head. Everyone can see it except me. Even if it's like this, it's not worth it. Su Jiuwei is confident in the matter of Luo Yuhao boarding the pirate ship. In order to maintain confidentiality, he has already notified all the super Douluo of the Star Luo Empire to gather near here in advance. Among them, the Star Luo Empire enshrines the main hall of the Golden Crocodile Douluo Xinluo, and is also a super Douluo at level 97. Although its condition is deteriorating and not inferior to its peak state back then, the difference between it and the stunning Douluo of the former martial god temple is not ordinary, but it is still one of the outstanding super Douluo. A layer of isolation barrier was created with extremely strong soul power in a close, not particularly close position to ensure the safety of this call. You may not be clear about how terrifying your own talents are. The ontological martial soul is already extremely powerful, and you are still the dual spiritual parts connecting the brain and eyes, the ultimate spiritual ontological martial soul. But if that's all, it's not worth my investment. You probably don't know what the origin of the martial soul is. Simply put, each type of martial soul has its own representative origin, even for those who have not awakened, it can be said that anyone will have it. The essence of the martial soul, like the Qi martial soul, is quite unique. They also have the origin of the soul, but it is not the form of the martial soul itself, so it will not be displayed and needs to be explored. But even the soul origins of extreme Douluo and their companions will be explored by the sixth soul skill of Star Crown, the Star Rope Elephant. It can be said that there is no martial soul origin in the world that Star Crown cannot explore. Even the three major limits at that time were captured enough by our Star Crown sect. But I cannot uncover you. What does this mean? I don't need to say it too much, you know. Su Jiuwei chose to delay the other party first, but did not mention the fact that he was being backfired. This is too terrifying, and he must ensure that the sealing of the message can only be known by him alone. Otherwise, if it is revealed, it will only be this one. It will arouse the restlessness of all the forces currently residing on the mainland. Oh no. It's impossible to be restless. It is a reckless attack on the Star Luo Empire, regardless of any cost, to snatch Hui Yuhao away. P.S. The origin of martial soul can be the origin of soul, but the origin of soul may not necessarily be the origin of martial soul. Necessary and sufficient conditions similar to mathematics. Upon hearing this, Hui Yuhao naturally understood that the other party had discovered their great potential. He's not stupid, of course he knows his purpose. He wants to tie himself to Xinluo, or more precisely, to his faction. He knew he was powerless, but still wanted to give it a try. He asked, "Shixia, isn't that good? After all, I am just a commoner, and this is related to the happiness of His Highness Su Jiujiu's life. I think it's better for him to make his own decisions." Hui Yuhao replied to him very politely. Emotions can be slowly cultivated over time. Moreover, I have seen you for a long time and have a good impression of you. He doesn't treat other men like this. In addition, as long as you agree, you can make some other demands, such as money, status, or power, I can give you. Su Jiuwei continued to throw out the olive branch and temptation. In his eyes, this kind of temptation is not something that ordinary people can withstand. Not to mention that Hui Yuhao is just a 12-year-old child in a remote rural area, even high-level generals in other countries cannot withstand such temptation. Is the temptation not enough for the full support of the Stara royal family and even the entire Stara Empire? Or is it that you don't appreciate the beauty of Su Jiujiu? Even if it's not all of this, even if it's selling face to the Luo royal family, there are a lot of people vying for it. Of course, Su Jiuwei still feels a bit overwhelmed. In front of this young man's talent, these so-called hand cards are not worth mentioning. But he is currently gambling, betting on information errors with the other party. As long as he can succeed, it will be a great achievement. For Hui Yuhao, none of the conditions proposed by Su Jiuwei truly touched his heart. Although with his help, things would progress faster, without his help, it would be harmless. However, listening to Su Jiuwei's tone, it seems that he has no other choice but to agree, and besides, it won't do much harm to himself. Your Majesty, I can agree to this condition, but in terms of material support, I don't need much of your support. I think I'm enough myself and don't want to hang too much of the royal flag. Hui Yuhao didn't agree to all of them, and he also anticipated that Su Jiuwei would mostly wait for himself to agree and directly send himself to Shrek, but it's obviously impossible. Furthermore, if you have consumed so many resources from Xinluo, you will have to spit out a corresponding amount later on. There is no free lunch in the world. However, this would be much better than Shrek. Shrek doesn't just spit out as much as you eat, but you have to hold it and spit it out on your back. Another thing is that I am not old enough. Although I can disguise myself, my current mastery of the power of creation is not enough. Another thing is that one's progress cannot be too fast. After all, one cannot hide all the time. More importantly, one stays to wait for the soul ring to condense, and also to wait for the heavenly dream. If one goes now, wouldn't it be in vain to wait before? As for why Hui Yuhao wants him, he is not very clear, but a persistent desire in his heart has always driven him to do so. Although this is not the best choice, the intention is indeed not lacking. A million-year soul ring can save him a lot of creative power, but this is not the most important thing. The main reason for wanting to wait for Tianmeng is to obtain the Divine King level powerhouse in terms of spiritual power. Ilix. Compared to it, Tianmeng is more like a gift. Oh. Isn't your name already close to the standard for admission to Shrek College at the age of 12? If you have soul power, I will send someone to help you find the highest limit of a century-old soul ring. After absorbing it, the camera won't take long, and you should also be able to meet the standard. Su Jiuwei's answer was indeed not surprising to Hui Yuhao, but in response, Hui Yuhao took out his so-called reason. Your Majesty, my age is actually only 7 years old. It was because I accidentally ate a fairy grass on the way that I became what I am now. Hui Yuhao once again activated his ability to deceive. Show me your hand, Su Jiuwei said with an incredulous expression on his face. Obviously, I don't believe Hui Yuhao's statement. Hui Yuhao was not afraid either, so he handed out his left hand and used his bone age to determine his age. This thing had already been played with poorly. Are you afraid that you could have undergone some degree of physical modification yourself? Moreover, Dowson has already developed a method for changing bone age on their own. Well, it seems you're not lying, Su Jiuwei said, although he still couldn't believe it. The truth is, well, you can go back. Your clothes are a bit tattered, and those 2 new clothes have already been left at the palace entrance. They will hand them over to you as soon as you leave. However, 2 pieces of clothing are definitely not enough. I have arranged for someone to check your body size when passing by and customize a few sets of clothes for you. You can also take them along. What, let me go back now. Hui Yuhao was a little surprised. As for giving him a few more clothes or something, he didn't really care, but then he thought about it. It wouldn't be a problem to let him go now. In the eyes of the other person, I am likely to have become a plaything that he can move at any time. Immediately, he made an imperial salute to His Majesty and turned around to leave. I even saw Su Jiujiu sneaking over at the corner. At this moment, he is hiding behind a thick stone pillar and peeking out to gaze at the stars. As Hui Yuhao walked towards this place, his blush rose again and he stretched his head back behind the stone pillar, like a cute and adorable little elf peeking at him. Watching Hui Yuhao leave unharmed. The stone hanging in Su Jiujiu's heart was also lowered. Hui Yuhao's figure grew farther and farther away, gradually disappearing into his back. His heart calmed down and he breathed a sigh of relief, but then he was called over by his brother Su Jiuwei. However, Hui Yuhao did not make much noise and chose to temporarily lose his sight as if he had not seen him. Walk directly towards the outside of the palace. Oh my God, I finally came out. I thought it was going to get cold, Hui Yuhao complained in his heart. However, today's losses are still quite significant. Su Jiuwei has discovered his own value, and with his personality, he is determined not to easily let go of strategic talents like himself. What would happen if I directly revealed my hatred towards Dai Hao? Hui Yuhao thought with a playful attitude, whether it was the original work or the explanation given by former Hui Yuhao to himself. The relationship between Dai Hao and Su Jiuwei learned from it is by no means as friendly as they have shown to outsiders. He was still thinking about it, but little did he know that the other party had already thought about this relationship. It's still a long time. Forget it, let's take a look later. Having multiple friends is better than having multiple enemies. Hui Yuhao completely emptied his mind and walked towards his hotel in Xinluo City. Nowadays, he doesn't have much emotional attachment to Su Jiujiu and only sees him as a person with a slightly excessive and off-the-beaten-track fate. There wasn't much emotion inside, so he didn't care at all. He felt that the relationship between the two of them was likely to continue like this. Archer. He thought this way and sneezed randomly, but for some reason Hui Yuhao felt that things and his own thoughts were not going as planned. Why is this guy okay? In the dark corner of the street, two strong men saw Hui Yuhao walking peacefully and asked a question in their hearts. Just as they were pondering for a moment, a pair of imperial guards walked up to their faces, beat them all up, and then tied them up and took them away. What awaited them could only be the merciless prison and the cruel torture. At this moment, Su Jiuwei was sitting on his bed in the palace, contemplating. He was not in a hurry for various ministers or his confidants to discuss. To be precise, he doesn't have any particularly trustworthy people, and most of the ministers in the court lean towards Dai Hao. As more and more people support the White Tiger tribe, the voice of the revered King Dai Hao is becoming louder and louder. However, Dai Hao's administrative style is well understood and he does not know how to operate solely using the old feudal system. If the empire falls into his hands, it will only repeat the same mistakes as before, and even become worse. The sun and moon next to him are still watching them closely, so whether for himself or for this country, he cannot give up this position. Although what he said sounded good, Su Jiuwei himself knew very well what was on his mind. Whenever there was a chance, he wished he could sit on the throne immediately. If Hui Yuhao's story is revealed, then this person is equivalent to giving in. Moreover, he is not unaware of what has happened in the Duke's mansion in the palace. When he heard Hui Yuhao's name, he had some reactions, although his appearance was quite different from before. But Su Jiuwei had already confirmed his identity from his words, but what does that matter? As long as we can tie him up to our own pirate ship, it's good. Moreover, the Duke of White Tiger treated him like this, and it's impossible for him to go back and recognize his ancestors. Forgive this father, right? Based on the intelligence he had, his mother Hui Yuner was kicked to death by Dai Hao's youngest son, Dai Huabin. Thinking back to what Hui Yuhao had said before, he roughly guessed the purpose of the other party's visit to Shrek. Overall, in his eyes, both Hui Yuhao and his common enemy had a white tiger duke. Although the level of hatred between the two sides was not consistent, after all, they were both enemies. Enemies were friends, and even if they were not friends, they could become allies. This can still be confirmed. As long as he constantly offers him benefits that he cannot refuse, he can always be pulled into his own camp. Su Jiuwei also didn't want to tie his sister to death with a young child, but the situation he faced had to be like this. The ministers in the court turned towards Duke Baihu, and their high-end military strength also turned towards him. Even the defending officers of Xinluo city were directly under his command. Compared to this situation, he could only make a sacrifice for a long time, and besides, this guy's talent is terrifying, to an extremely extreme extent. Now he's still young and looks good, but if this guy is crooked, with his talent, there will never be fewer women willing to embrace him. As this idea gradually extended, it was as if one could see the scene of Hui Yuhao embracing the fishing pond and meat forest as he grew up. He was a little scared. Although he had engaged Su Jiujiu to this recently acquainted child for the benefit of the empire, as an older brother, he didn't want his sister to live a miserable life and become a concubine. Even if he knew about this guy's talent, he would have no choice but to become a concubine in the future. But his sister must be the main palace. Su Jiuwei thought to himself, it seems better to send some people to monitor him. It would be best to guide him during his growth process. Just treat it as a test for this brother.in.law. It's a bit biased. Su Jiuwei quickly sorted out his thoughts and returned to politics. Although he was not in power for a long time, his understanding of politics was not bad. He also wanted to make profits for his people to win their hearts. But would those old fogies in the officialdom do as he wanted? Just like soul guides, things like these that can enhance social productivity and change the entire society are clearly unacceptable to those stubborn stories. The ruling class does not pursue the development of technology, but rather the stagnation of technology, which can cause productivity to stagnate. Further consolidate one's own position and rule. A better class is driven by the continuous development of productive forces. From the primitive civilization to the slave society, and now to the feudal class, it is also the case that all progress is gradually made by the development of productive forces. But this also means that the development of productive forces will promote the extinction of classes that are unfavorable to the development of productive forces. But today's aristocratic bureaucrats in politics only want to consolidate themselves, but if they consolidate their own interests and power, will foreign countries not invade? The sun and moon on the side are watching closely, while neighboring countries claim to be allies, but in reality, each has its own ulterior motives. In recent years, sun and moon have had close contact with the Holy Spirit Church. If the combination of the two really supplements sun and moon's high-end combat power, will the Second Continental War still be won by the Douluo Three Kingdoms? If soul guides are really as bad as those people think, why does Shrek heavily invest a large amount of annual income into soul guides? Of course, if it weren't for Shrek Academy, there would have been a sage like him who saw that soul masters would inevitably become the future of the rise of past-style soul masters, so he first started the development of soul guides. If he uses this as an excuse to develop soul guides again, he is afraid that the progress of Xinluo's soul guides will still be zero. However, this child doesn't seem as simple as I thought. He's not blind, he's so calm when facing me, and he doesn't give up easily when facing temptations. Thinking about Su Jiuwei, not only did he feel a bit cold behind his back, but he was just a 7-year-old child. Such a state of mind, dare to ask what would happen if he grows up again. In the end, the question went back and forth, and it turned back to Hui Yuhao. It may not be possible to inherit one's position and lead Xinluo further after a little training. No, Hui Yuhao, this child must be used for me, no matter how much it costs. Su Jiuwei slammed the back of the bed with force, making a muffled sound.